One pleasant afternoon, a brother and sister were enjoying themselves in a picturesque garden. The garden was lush with vibrant flowers, and there was a sturdy old tree with a swing attached to it, standing majestically beside a serene lake. The boy, full of energy and excitement, stood on the swing and eagerly asked his sister to push him harder. The sister, always wanting to please her younger brother, did as he asked. With a powerful push, the boy swung high and then, laughing with exhilaration, let go and plunged into the lake. Water splashed everywhere, soaking his sister, who watched with a mixture of amusement and concern. The boy emerged from the water, his face beaming with joy. He exclaimed that it was incredibly fun and insisted that his sister should try it too. The sister hesitated, feeling a pang of worry. She glanced at the swing and thought, isn't this more like a scene from a dramatic suicide where someone jumps from the top of a swing into a lake? She looked at her brother, who was brimming with enthusiasm, and thought to herself that this boy, who would one day become the strongest person in the world, seemed unstoppable. Meanwhile, she feared she would end up in the afterlife if she tried this stunt. Yet, her brother was relentless. He insisted once again, telling her how enjoyable the swing was and urging her to give it a go. Reluctantly, the sister stood on the swing. Her heart pounded in her chest as her brother, full of encouragement, gave her a strong push. She flew through the air and then plummeted into the lake. As she went underwater, she felt a wave of panic. No matter how hard she struggled, there seemed to be no way to escape this situation. The real story begins now. In her previous life, our female protagonist was an ordinary graduate student. One day, she and her fellow assistants went on a team-building activity, which involved climbing a hill behind their campus. The hike was exhausting, and she found herself struggling to keep up. The guide, noticing their fatigue, cheerfully encouraged them to buckle up, reminding them that young people like them shouldn't be worn out so easily. Our protagonist, polite and respectful, told the guide that keeping up with him was challenging because he was so fit. The real reason she was tired was that she had been dragged out for this hike after pulling an all-nighter in the lab the previous day. As they climbed, he remarked that this place hadn't changed since his student days and decided to take a picture to commemorate his visit. Our protagonist, always helpful, stood up and offered to take the pictures for him. She was good at photography and was happy to assist. She started clicking pictures of the man, asking him to pose in various ways to capture the moment perfectly. As she busily snapped photos, she edged closer to the end of the mountain. The old man, wanting a better shot, advised her to step back a bit more to capture the full background. Obliging his request, she took a step back but miscalculated her footing and fell from the mountain. At that moment, she realized with horror that she was going to die. Back in her current life, her brother, showing remarkable strength, pulled her out of the lake. He asked her if she was all right, his face filled with concern. The sister, still dazed from the experience, marveled at her brother's incredible grip strength. She knew that he would become the strongest person in the future. Her brother, clearly shaken, scolded her gently, telling her to stop playing such dangerous pranks with him. After a while, they resumed playing together, but the sister's mind was elsewhere. She thought about how she was already on Killian's bad side. If she couldn't win him over, her future life could be in jeopardy. A while ago, she had found herself among a group of people. This little girl stood quietly with them, listening as they discussed her fate. They were debating how they could take her in when they already had 5 children of their own. After saying goodbye to her previous world, due to the professor's photo, she had opened her eyes to find herself in the middle of a cemetery. The people around her were discussing their inability to take her in because they were not in a position to do so. Our female protagonist had died in her original world and was reborn in this new one. As a cute little girl, her height barely reached the waist of an adult, and she was surrounded by people who seemed quite angry for some reason. It seemed like she was an orphan, not welcomed by anyone. People started pushing her towards others, asking them to take her, but nobody wanted to. Suddenly, the people started discussing that orphanages nowadays were desperate for girls and were even willing to pay money to take them in. Our small protagonist, sensing danger, started running for her life. She questioned herself, wondering what better options she had in this situation. It was better to survive on her own than to be stuck with others, but suddenly she crashed into a couple. The lady and gentleman she collided with looked at her with concern. The lady asked her if she was all right and called her by her name, Rihanna. The people who had been chasing her approached the couple and demanded they hand over the girl. Rihanna quickly informed the couple that these people were trying to sell her as a slave. The people, trying to defend themselves, claimed it was all a misunderstanding. The man, however, was not convinced. He told the people that if they were going to send her to an orphanage anyway, they would take her. The people then questioned him, asking how they could trust that he would take good care of the child. In response, the man handed them a pouch filled with gold coins, which seemed to satisfy them. The man and the woman took Rihanna with them and apologized for whatever inconvenience she had faced. Rihanna, curious and cautious, asked if they knew her. The lady smiled warmly and told her that she was her mother's closest friend. She explained that Rihanna's mother was also a noble. When she was young, she was quite famous in society until she ran away with Rihanna's father. The lady assured Rihanna that they would be by her side from now on. As they reached their home, Rihanna was in awe. It was a huge and beautiful mansion, and she thought that if heaven existed, it would look just like this. As they entered the place, a boy stood near the stairs. The couple called him Killian, introducing him as their son. Rihanna found Killian incredibly cute, with his long eyelashes and adorable cheeks. His cuteness was simply irresistible. The parents introduced Killian to Rihanna, informing him that she was going to be a new family member. Rihanna and Killian shook hands, and he called her sister. Rihanna was enchanted by his cuteness and couldn't resist pinching his cheeks, which she did. She was delighted to find that his cheeks were as soft as rice cakes. This was the day when she met Killian, the one who would become the strongest person in the future in this world. As Rihanna pinched Killian's cheek, she couldn't help but notice the intense look of anger that crossed his face. Their mother observed this interaction and remarked with a smile that it seemed like Rihanna liked Killian. Intrigued, she turned to Killian and asked if he liked her back. Killian responded affirmatively, saying yes. Then, in a hopeful tone, he asked his mother if he could show his new sister around the house. His mother was overjoyed at the sight of them already bonding so closely. Killian grabbed Rihanna's hand, leading her to come with him as he intended to show her room. As they ascended the grand staircase, Rihanna's eyes were drawn to Killian's form ahead of her. She couldn't help but notice that Killian's bum was particularly nice, and the mischievous thought of giving it a pat crossed her mind. While she was lost in these thoughts, she missed a step and stumbled. Just as she began to fall, Killian turned back and quickly warned her, "Be careful on the third step from the top. It's a fake step designed to trick thieves." Rihanna, catching her balance, retorted that he could have mentioned this sooner, a hint of irritation in her voice. Killian continued to lead Rihanna to her new room. When they arrived, Rihanna's eyes widened in awe. The room was breathtakingly beautiful, decorated in shades of pink with accents of gold. Soft, plush teddy bears and elegantly wrapped gifts were scattered about the room, creating a sense of warmth and welcome. Rihanna couldn't help but compare this lavish room to the humble home she had in her previous life, thinking it was far grander than anything she had ever experienced. Killian, ever the mischievous guide, showed her a seemingly innocent curtain. As he pulled it back, a cloud of dust was released, covering Rihanna. She wondered if he was doing this on purpose to annoy her. Killian, seeing her reaction, turned around and asked with a smirk if she was okay. Rihanna, despite her annoyance, pretended that everything was fine. Internally, Rihanna tried to console herself, reasoning that Killian wouldn't be doing all of these things intentionally because he was still young and maybe just playful. However, as they continued their tour, her suspicions grew. Killian seemed to take delight in showing her the various traps and tricks around the house. He opened a water tap in such a way that a jet of water splashed directly onto her face, soaking her. Later, he led her to a spot where, according to him, pressing a button would light the stove. Instead, when she pressed it, it released a small electric shock. Rihanna's initial belief that these incidents were accidental began to wane as they kept occurring. Eventually, she couldn't ignore the pattern and decided to confront Killian, asking him outright if he was doing all of this on purpose. Rihanna told Killian firmly that he shouldn't be engaging in such troublesome behavior, and that it wasn't right to cause others distress. Killian, unfazed, turned toward her and asked with a defiant tone, "So what are you going to tell Mom and Dad?" Rihanna responded that if he continued with his mischievous antics, she would have no choice but to complain to their parents. Killian's response was chilling. He told her that if things got worse, she would be the one kicked out, not him. Rihanna realized he wasn't wrong. Her position in the family was tenuous, relying solely on the Duchess's past friendship with her mother. Desperate to understand why Killian harbored such animosity towards her, Rihanna asked if he disliked her. Killian's blunt response was yes. When she inquired further, seeking to understand his reasons, he cryptically told her to think about it. Puzzled and a bit hurt, Rihanna found herself in front of a portrait. As she traced the lines of the painting with her hand, she realized it depicted the 35th Duke of Astera. The name struck a chord in her memory. As she pieced together the clues, it dawned on her that the boy next to her was none other than Killian Astera, the male lead from a novel she had read in her previous life. Killian was known for his incredible strength but also for his terrible personality and sociopathic tendencies. He had an older sister of common origin who wasn't the legitimate heir, but acted as though she was. This sister bullied the female lead, only to be eventually killed by Killian himself. Rihanna pondered why Killian disliked her so intensely, even though she hadn't done anything to him yet. Reflecting on their interactions, she recalled how she had pinched his cheek earlier. In the novel, Killian was notorious for holding grudges and taking revenge for even the slightest offenses. Rihanna realized that she might be in serious trouble, but she wasn't someone who would give up easily. Determined to survive, she concluded that there was only one way to ensure her safety. She needed to gain Killian's favor. Rihanna devised a plan to win Killian over. She observed that he trained alone, and thought that by becoming his training partner, she might be able to endear herself to him. One day, she gathered her courage and approached him during his training session. Before she could say anything, Killian noticed her and asked, somewhat annoyed, what she was doing there. Rihanna quickly explained that she wanted to be friends with him, but Killian flatly refused. Undeterred, she thought about how she could be of assistance to him. She decided that at the very least, she could help by retrieving his arrows. To win his favor, she complimented his archery skills, telling him he handled the arrows with impressive precision and suggesting he might be the best archer in the country. Killian, however, dismissed her flattery, stating that his father was the best archer. Rihanna swiftly changed the subject, hoping to avoid further confrontation. A few days later, as Rihanna wandered through the vast library, she heard a voice from behind her, "Do you have the items?" She turned and responded that she had brought them, realizing that she had stumbled upon a potential weakness of Killian's. This discovery gave her a glimmer of hope. It was a box of colorful macarons. Killian praised her, saying, "Good job," with a smile. Rihanna, with a glint of expectation in her eyes, asked about the fee for the errand she had just run. Killian, while munching on the macarons, told her she was being childish. Rihanna, feeling slightly annoyed, asked him if he couldn't be more mature and share some of the sweets with her. Killian, feeling a bit magnanimous, responded that as an adult, he would give her two. They often met between the library bookshelves, a place where their risky exchanges began. These habits started during tea time. One day, they were having tea with the Duchess. The Duchess offered Rihanna some macarons and informed her that these were new snacks brought from the capital, renowned for their sweetness. The Duchess asked Rihanna if she liked sweets and mentioned that Killian hated sweets. She added that she always wanted to buy something like this if she had a daughter. In this family, the Duke, the Duchess, and Killian never touched sweets. During every tea time, Rihanna was the only one eating them diligently, and it seemed the others had noticed. Rihanna thanked the Duchess sincerely and started eating the macarons. The macarons had a crispy exterior that crumbled delightfully, and a thick jam that oozed out with each bite. The Duchess, with a gentle smile, asked Killian if he wanted to have some. She knew he didn't like sweets, but since his sister found them delicious, she thought he might give them a try. Killian, feeling a bit adventurous, said yes this time and reached for a macaron. But suddenly, he withdrew his hand, denying his earlier decision, and declared that only kids liked sweets. He resumed drinking his tea. The Duchess, understanding his hesitation, told Rihanna to have all the sweets, and Rihanna didn't refuse the generous offer. Killian watched her with a mixture of annoyance and curiosity while she enjoyed the sweets. Rihanna told the Duchess that she couldn't eat them all at once, so she decided to keep the box and eat them whenever she felt hungry. Killian had developed a habit of asking Rihanna to bring the sweets to him quietly in the library space, ensuring no one noticed him indulging. After a few more of these clandestine trades, it seemed like Killian's opinion of Rihanna improved. One day, while Killian was eating the sweets, Rihanna warned him that if he ate all of them, he might get sick. Killian, trying to appear tough, told her that sweets were for children and that he didn't indulge in them. Despite his words, he clearly enjoyed the sweets but didn't want to admit that he was still a kid. He wanted to maintain a tough and mature persona. Killian believed that cool adults, like the Duke and Duchess, didn't eat sweets. Killian, with a serious expression, told Rihanna that he had been an adult like his parents since he was 2 years old. He handed the sweets back to Rihanna, trying to reinforce his mature image. Killian then looked at Rihanna and hinted, "Don't you want to eat chocolate and hard candy?" He was subtly indicating that he wanted to eat them too. Rihanna understood his hint very well, gave him a playful wink, and said she would let the Duchess know about his preference right away. This shared secret helped them develop a good relationship. Rihanna also told Killian that if he needed anything else, he could call her anytime. Rihanna was finally happy, thinking it would be nice to maintain this relationship just as it was. Nothing more, nothing less, if she had to survive. Some time later, in a room, a girl approached Rihanna and asked if she was from a common background. Rihanna looked at the girl and recognized her as the daughter of the Humphrey Viscount family, a cadet branch. Rihanna, recalling the novel she had read, thought about how this girl showed her true colors once the adults and Killian left. The girl told Rihanna that if she were in her position, she would be too ashamed to show her face. She also predicted that Rihanna would have a hard time in social circles later. Rihanna had no plans to join any social circles. The girl continued to rant about how embarrassing it would be for Rihanna to join any social circles. But Rihanna's plan was to become independent before Killian became an adult. In the original story, Killian was known for his horrible personality and later plotted to overthrow his father. He seized his title as soon as he fell in love with the heroine, after the Duke and Duchess were ousted. The adopted daughter's execution followed swiftly. Despite the recent improvement in her relationship with Killian, Rihanna knew that anything could happen. For now, winning Killian's favor was Rihanna's priority, and she was also steadily saving up for her independence fund. The girl standing behind Rihanna continued talking and asked if she was ignoring her. But suddenly, Killian entered the room. The girl quickly changed her attitude and told Killian that she had been looking for him for a while. The girl's name was Olivia. Killian and Olivia decided to go and play somewhere else. Olivia, with a haughty tone, asked Rihanna not to come with them as she didn't want to play with her. Killian, sensing the tension, told Rihanna to wait for a moment and assured her that he'd be right back. Killian gave a wicked smile as he and Olivia walked away, leaving Rihanna with an inexplicable sense of unease. Her fears were justified when Killian returned alone. Later, the parents were standing in front of Killian and Rihanna, interrogating them about Olivia. A woman present asked Rihanna to explain everything in detail, as she was the oldest one there. Rihanna was asked what she had been doing all the time, making her feel the weight of the situation. Killian, sensing the growing tension and wanting to protect his sister, stepped forward bravely. He firmly stated that it wasn't Rihanna's fault. He explained that Olivia had explicitly said she didn't want to play with a commoner. The women were taken aback by this revelation, their expressions shifting to one of shock and disbelief. One of them, regaining her composure, asked Killian if he knew where Olivia had gone. Killian informed them that the last thing he knew was that she had told him she was going to the bathroom, but he wasn't certain beyond that. The Duke, recognizing the urgency of the situation, instructed his people to start searching for her both inside and outside the mansion, organizing a comprehensive search effort. Killian and Rihanna were sitting in a quiet room, waiting anxiously for any news about Olivia. Killian, trying to mask his concern with impatience, remarked that it would take forever to have dinner now. Rihanna, sitting there thoughtfully, looked at Killian and asked if he really didn't know where Olivia went. Killian, maintaining his earlier stance, told her that he genuinely didn't know. For a moment, Rihanna wanted to believe him because this Killian seemed different from the character in the novel she had read. The Killian she observed was diligent, quietly attending lessons that were too difficult for a child his age, completing his regular training without complaining, and always behaving maturely, never mistreating the servants. But if the character in the novel was his true self, in the worst case, Olivia could be dead by now. This troubling thought occupied Rihanna's mind, adding to her anxiety. Rihanna, unable to suppress her curiosity and concern, asked Killian again if he had any idea which way Olivia might have gone since she mentioned going to the bathroom. Killian, with a hint of irritation, turned the question back on her, asking if she didn't really like Olivia, and if that was the case, why she kept asking about her. Rihanna, sensing the need to clarify her intentions, told Killian that there must be some misunderstanding, as she did like Olivia and was genuinely worried about her. Killian was silent for a while, his face thoughtful, and then asked Rihanna if she really wanted to know where Olivia was. Rihanna, feeling a deep sense of worry and responsibility, couldn't just stand by and be an accomplice to a potential tragedy. She told Killian earnestly that she really wanted to find Olivia, and pleaded for his help. Killian, seeing the genuine concern in her eyes and feeling a twinge of empathy, finally relented and told her that Olivia was in the bathroom on the 5th floor. Rihanna was puzzled, trying to recall if there were indeed bathrooms on the 5th floor. On the 5th floor, there was one bathroom in the butler's room, another in the maid's quarters, and one in an unused guest room, although the guest room's bathroom was known to be broken. Killian suggested that Olivia might have used the butler's bathroom, but also noted that Olivia wouldn't use the common bathroom that the servants used. Indirectly, Killian made it clear where Olivia might be. As they searched for Olivia, Rihanna couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the enormity of the house, its vastness making the search feel almost impossible. Killian, noticing her frustration and attempting to lighten the mood, even asked if they could stop and go eat some chocolate. However, Rihanna, determined and genuinely worried, insisted that they continue searching for Olivia. Killian, slightly amused but also intrigued by Rihanna's determination, asked if she really liked Olivia that much. Their search continued, the tension growing with each passing minute, and the mansion's expansive hallways and numerous rooms only adding to their anxiety. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of searching and worrying, they found Olivia stuck in a basin with a malfunctioning spell. The spell had trapped her in a bizarre and dangerous way, and to save her, they had to cut her hair with scissors. Rihanna wasn't prepared for this drastic measure. The thought of cutting Olivia's hair was unsettling, but there was no other choice. Killian, taking charge of the situation, carefully cut Olivia's hair and freed her from the spell's grip. Olivia, now safe but visibly shaken, looked at them with a mix of relief and embarrassment. Killian, his usual composure returning, had only saved Olivia because his sister insisted she loved her. This incident solidified the complicated dynamics within the family, leaving Rihanna with much to ponder about her place in this intricate household and the true nature of those around her. Rihanna, although praising Killian for his efforts, couldn't hide her apprehension and fright at the scene unfolding before her eyes. Viscount, seated at the dining table, expressed her heartfelt gratitude towards Killian for locating Olivia. The entire family was gathered around the dining table, enjoying their meal. Killian, with a calm demeanor, clarified to everyone present that it wasn't him who had found Olivia, but his sister who had discovered her whereabouts. Olivia, with tears welling up in her eyes, looked at her mother and the assembled guests, and in a trembling voice, she revealed that Killian had cut her hair. She wanted to voice her complaint about his actions, but considering Killian was the son of the Duke, no one dared to take any action against him. Olivia's mother, trying to diffuse the tension, said soothingly, "It looks nice on you, and you look more beautiful than before." Rihanna, observing the scene, noticed everyone showering Killian with praise. She watched as Killian, with his small yet skillful hands, sliced a stick perfectly. As she gazed into his eyes, Rihanna could see that Killian didn't harbor any regret for what he had done to Olivia. Suddenly, the Duchess spoke up, addressing Rihanna with pride in her voice. She expressed how proud she was of Rihanna, stating that if it weren't for her, they wouldn't have found Olivia. The Duke, joining in, reiterated that they owed their thanks to Rihanna. Meanwhile, the Viscount and his wife who had accompanied Olivia seemed displeased with Rihanna, harboring disdain because she was merely a commoner. In an attempt to lighten the mood, Olivia's mother tried to change the subject, announcing that they had almost forgotten to give the children their gifts. She had brought a special gift for Killian, dolls shaped like monsters, crafted by the most renowned artisan in the capital. Additionally, she handed him some pocket money and a gold coin as a reward for cutting Olivia's hair. The Duchess also presented Olivia with a gift and some pocket money. As the gifts were distributed, Rihanna couldn't help but wonder if she too would receive any money. The Duchess then stood behind Rihanna and announced that it was time for her to receive a gift. However, Olivia's mother and Viscount who had accompanied her declared that they hadn't brought any gift for Rihanna. Rihanna, who suspected this was because she was a commoner, felt a twinge of disappointment. Her dream was to become rich, and as an ordinary person, she knew that money was essential. Mustering her courage, Rihanna asked the woman if she could simply receive pocket money. Viscount standing next to her scolded her, calling her a greedy child for asking so directly. At that moment, the Duke and Duchess stood up, defending Rihanna. They confronted the Viscount, expressing disbelief that she would only offer pocket money to one person and claimed ignorance of her financial troubles. The Duke added that although he had heard rumors about the Viscount's financial difficulties, he hadn't expected them to be so severe. The Duchess, taking the situation into her own hands, assured Rihanna that she would give her pocket money on behalf of the Viscount. Rihanna was then presented with a custom-made doll, adorned with real jewels, crafted by an exceptionally skilled artisan. As Rihanna held the exquisite doll, she heard Killian's voice and assumed he must be upset because she had received more gifts than him. But when she looked up, she saw Killian staring intently at the Viscount and his wife, his eyes filled with a dangerous seriousness. Later that night, Rihanna, clutching a pillow, nervously approached Killian's room. She asked if they could sleep together because she was anxious about what might happen during the night. Her primary concern was ensuring Killian's safety, as she decided to stay by his side all night to prevent any harm from coming to him. She tried to maintain a reasonable distance while keeping their relationship amicable. Killian opened the door and, with a hint of curiosity, asked Rihanna why she wanted to sleep with him. Rihanna, trying to hide her true fears, admitted that she was scared to sleep alone. Killian, calling her a coward, grabbed her hand and led her inside the room. Rihanna held onto his hand tightly, determined not to let him escape. Reflecting on the long day, Rihanna felt exhausted and ready to fall asleep immediately. However, Killian, lying next to her, asked why she was so kind to Olivia. Rihanna found his innocence endearing and answered with a proverb, "Cuteness forgives everything." Killian, not fully understanding, asked if she was okay. To change the topic, Rihanna simply replied, "Killian, you are very wonderful." Killian, seemingly satisfied, wished his sister good night and urged her to sleep well. Riene, looking at him, couldn't help but find him incredibly cute. She wondered if this was how cat owners felt about their pets. Although she knew what kind of person Killian might become in the future, his current cuteness often overshadowed everything else in her mind. Rihanna thought that once Olivia left, they would be able to put some distance between them, making things easier. The following morning, Killian woke up, contemplating the events of the previous day. He felt that he had merely given Olivia the punishment she deserved for tormenting his sister. Yet, strangely, it seemed like he was the only one being viewed with odd expressions. Resolutely, Killian looked at his sister and decided that she was his one and only precious subordinate, the one constant in his life. The following day, Killian and Rihanna found themselves seated in the library, each engrossed in a book. The tranquility of their reading was soon interrupted when Olivia burst into the room, clutching a doll in her small hands. With an anxious expression, she approached Rihanna and asked if she would accompany her to the bathroom. Olivia's fear from the previous day's incident was still evident. Although Rihanna initially declined, she soon realized that refusing might lead to regret. Thus, she decided to go with Olivia. Olivia, clearly anxious, hurriedly dragged Rihanna along. Later, the three of them were involved in an elaborate game where Olivia took on the role of a princess. She tasked her prince with the mission of slaying a fearsome monster to rescue her. In this imaginative play, Rihanna was cast as the prince, while Killian was designated as the monster. Olivia, with great enthusiasm, told Rihanna that if the prince managed to defeat the monster, she would agree to marry her as part of their play. Killian stood between Rihanna and Olivia, puzzled by Olivia's intense behavior. Rihanna was expected to be with Olivia throughout, including during moments like sitting in the bathroom or washing her hands, since Olivia was terrified of the sink. To ease Olivia's fear, Rihanna even captured a tiny spider for her. This act endeared Rihanna to Olivia, who then became a devoted fan of Rihanna. Olivia constantly asked the prince to marry her, and Rihanna, somewhat amused, agreed. Suddenly, Killian had a thought and asked if Rihanna was genuinely planning to marry Olivia. Rihanna wondered if Killian was out of his mind because, in their game, Olivia and Rihanna were the main characters, with Killian assigned the role of the monster. Killian then reminded Rihanna that she had previously told him he was cuter than Olivia, and therefore, instead of Olivia, he wanted to marry Rihanna. Olivia interrupted, stating firmly that Rihanna could not marry Killian because she was already planning to marry her. Killian then questioned Olivia whether she could give more gifts than he could, explaining that the true rule of happiness was to live joyfully and exchange many gifts. He recounted how the Duke and Duchess often gave each other presents even when it wasn't their anniversary. Killian's idea of marriage seemed to revolve around the concept of exchanging gifts. At this moment, the Duchess appeared from behind and inquired about Killian's statements. She explained to him that, as family members, Rihanna and Killian could not marry each other. The Duchess also made it clear that despite Killian's affection for Rihanna, it was impossible for him to marry his sister. Killian was deeply upset by this revelation. Meanwhile, Rihanna, despite understanding that it was only a game, realized that marriage was a significant matter for nobility, and something that should be properly taught to the younger generation. The Duchess picked up Killian, informed Rihanna that Killian needed to have a discussion with his mother, and took him away. Killian's absence was noticeable for a period of time. After a few days, Olivia returned home, and soon afterward, Killian reappeared. Rihanna inquired about his whereabouts and whether he was okay. Killian explained that he had been with his mother and, more importantly, presented her with a jar filled with snacks. This jar was Killian's treasured box number 1, snacks. Rihanna was puzzled as to why Killian was giving it to her. Killian explained that it was the most valuable item to him, so he decided to present it to his sister and formally ask her to marry him. Rihanna was taken aback to receive a marriage proposal from one of the most prominent characters in the novel. Although Killian had initially shown animosity towards her, Rihanna was now left wondering how their relationship had become so close. With a laugh, she questioned if the jar was intended as a proposal gift and reminded Killian that siblings could not marry. Killian, undeterred, stated that he didn't care about the rules and was determined to marry his sister. After a moment of contemplation, Rihanna, smiling, agreed to the proposal. Killian then moved closer and embraced Rihanna. Rihanna found herself reflecting on how this little boy would eventually meet the heroine and fall in love with her. She considered playfully biting Killian's cheeks but ended up doing so unconsciously. Killian warned her that they would soon be in serious trouble and needed to escape together. Meanwhile, the Duke and Duchess were engaged in a discussion about whether Killian's week of imprisonment was excessively harsh. The Duchess mentioned that Killian had made the Viscount and his wife bald, and she had expended significant magical energy to create a wig, indicating that Killian needed some guidance. Suddenly, a guard arrived with the news that young Master Killian had struck the guards and escaped. The Duke and Duchess were both frustrated and worried about their son's well-being. Killian persistently insisted to Rihanna that they were in grave danger and needed to escape from their house immediately. That day, Rihanna spent the entire night trying to calm Killian's incessant rambling. The true nature of Killian's warnings became clear a week later. On that day, Rihanna was dressed exquisitely in a blue dress, and the Duchess praised her, saying she looked stunning and that the dress suited her perfectly. Rihanna graciously thanked the Duchess for selecting the dress. The Duke, Duchess, Killian, and Rihanna were sitting in chairs, preparing to go to the National Foundation Day celebration. The Duchess also casually mentioned that there might be lines of men interested in marrying their dear Rihanna. Killian leaned in and whispered in Rihanna's ear, reiterating that attending the National Foundation Day celebration would be extremely dangerous, and that they should make an escape as soon as possible. Rihanna, her face pale with worry, pondered the idea of escaping later on her own after she had saved up enough money. Killian was reminded that as a member of the Astera family, and the guest of honor, his absence at the National Foundation Day celebration was unthinkable. Rihanna reflected on this, thinking that even though she had read this novel, she was unaware of this particular fact. The first emperor who founded the empire was the initial Duke of Astera. However, after the empire's foundation, he established a state affairs board and handed over the emperor's position to the prime minister. Rihanna mused that Killian bore a striking resemblance to his ancestors. The Duchess then informed Killian that this year's National Foundation Day celebration was even more special because it was the first time their Rihanna Astera would attend an official event. At the palace, the Duke, Duchess, and the young lord and lady were announced as they entered. Most people bowed their heads in respect, but there were also sharp, scrutinizing gazes from nobles directed at Rihanna, who was a commoner. These gazes were more blatant and judgmental than Rihanna had anticipated. While Rihanna was lost in her thoughts, feeling the weight of the judgment around her, the Duchess gently held her hand and invited her to come along. Women standing in the palace began greeting the Duchess and inquiring about their daughter, Rihanna. The Duchess made her way through the crowd, proudly introducing her daughter to everyone. During a conversation with a countess, the Duchess asked if her son had attended the event. The Duchess also mentioned that the Countess's son was around the same age as Rihanna. As soon as the Duchess said this, Killian placed his hand on his mother's face. The Duchess, slightly annoyed, told Killian that the conversation was between women and asked him to go find his father. Suddenly, a strikingly beautiful young lady, Marchioness Magin, approached and greeted the Duchess and the young lord. She inquired about Rihanna with genuine interest. Rihanna found the Marchioness to be exceptionally beautiful and impressive. The Marchioness also asked if the young lord had been well recently. Killian, curious, asked the Marchioness if Marquis Magin also had a daughter. She laughed and introduced her daughter, Esmeralda. Esmeralda had straight, ebony-like hair, purple eyes, and gorgeous features. She was the female lead of the original novel. Rihanna felt relieved to see her and decided that she must become friends with her. She thought about how, in the original story, she was destined to be killed by Killian. To avoid this fate, Rihanna resolved to be endlessly kind to the female lead. The Marchioness remarked that the young lady seemed to be the same age as her daughter and expressed her hope that they could become close friends. Rihanna saw this as her opportunity and decided to spend time with Lady Esmeralda. Rihanna asked Killian if he would join them, but he replied that he needed to stay with his mother. Rihanna speculated that since the original novel hadn't started yet, neither of them seemed interested in each other. Esmeralda embodied the very essence of the female lead in the novel. She warmly suggested that Rihanna call her Esme. The only thing that seemed different was that the daughter of Marquis Magin appeared too stiff, whereas in the original novel, Esmeralda was the beloved daughter of a marquess, known for her bold and cheerful personality. Rihanna found Esmeralda incredibly adorable, and they both expressed a desire to become friends. Rihanna decided that for now, becoming friends was her top priority. She wanted to learn all about Esmeralda's hobbies and started asking her questions about fencing, horseback riding, and archery. Esmeralda informed Rihanna that she was diligently practicing, but that her skills were not yet very good. As they conversed, Rihanna remembered that in the original novel, the two main characters shared similar hobbies and skills, making them a perfect match. However, it seemed that Esmeralda's skills hadn't improved yet. Rihanna asked Esmeralda if she liked snacks, thinking that, according to her knowledge, children typically loved snacks. Esmeralda admitted that she liked snacks but mentioned that they were forbidden because they made her gain weight. Rihanna was shocked to hear this from a child. Suddenly, Esmeralda was struck by a severe headache. Rihanna told Esmeralda to wait for a moment as she wanted to bring some warm soup and food to help her regain her energy. As Rihanna went to gather these items, she pondered the significant differences between Esmeralda and the confident female lead she remembered. Rihanna wondered if the original story had changed and resolved to keep a close eye on Esmeralda while growing closer to her as a friend. While thinking about all this and carrying the soup, Rihanna was suddenly pushed from behind by someone, causing the soup to spill and fall to the ground. In that brief moment, Rihanna's thoughts raced. If she died here, she would have to reincarnate and work as a palace maid just to afford a single gem. However, it turned out she merely fell to the floor and survived the incident. As she gathered herself, 3 young girls stood in front of her. The girl in the middle, with an accusatory tone, claimed that Rihanna had pushed her. It dawned on Rihanna that she had stumbled into a cliched scenario where young noble ladies engage in bullying. This was all too predictable for her. As Rihanna looked around, she noticed that a crowd had started to gather, watching the scene unfold. The girl in the middle continued, scolding Rihanna, saying that regardless of her common background, pushing people without even apologizing was utterly unacceptable. The girl standing beside her chimed in, adding that Lady Ramira's incredibly expensive dress had gotten stained because of Rihanna. It became clear that the girl in the middle was named Ramira. The third girl, with a haughty expression, demanded to know how Rihanna planned to take responsibility for this mishap. Rihanna stood up, brushing off the dust from her clothes, and decided that she needed to educate these girls quickly and efficiently. She maintained her composure and turned the situation to her advantage. She calmly stated that the shoes she was wearing were specially made for this occasion, and since Ramira had pushed her and stained them, Ramira should take full responsibility. Ramira immediately began to argue, insisting that it was Rihanna who had pushed her. However, Rihanna wasn't paying attention to her protests. Instead, she acted as though Ramira was apologizing for her mistake, completely ignoring Ramira's complaints. This only served to further annoy and anger Ramira, who was infuriated by Rihanna's seemingly careless attitude. Rihanna continued to act as if Ramira had offered to compensate her, no matter the cost. Ramira, bewildered and frustrated, found it hard to understand what was happening. Rihanna was not only ignoring her but also twisting the narrative to blame everything on Ramira. Ramira had never anticipated this turn of events. She had assumed that Rihanna, being a commoner, wouldn't dare to speak up against her. Yet, this was clearly not the case. Tears welled up in Ramira's eyes as she struggled to maintain her composure. Rihanna, seeing this, wondered if she had gone too far with her approach. Deciding to bring the confrontation to a close, Rihanna stated that if compensation for the damages was arranged, all would be forgiven. As Ramira tried to stop Rihanna from leaving, she tripped and fell into a pool of spilled soup. Rihanna turned to help but ended up slipping as well. However, she was caught and saved by a boy who had been observing the scene. Rihanna gratefully thanked him for saving her from further embarrassment. At that moment, Ramira's mother arrived, her face a mask of anger, and demanded to know who had done this to her daughter. Ramira, pointing a trembling finger at Rihanna, placed the blame squarely on her. Rihanna realized that this was a significant problem and she had no desire to attract further attention. Ramira's mother began to scold Rihanna harshly, questioning the quality of the upbringing she had received at home. Rihanna tried to explain the situation, but her patience wore thin. She decided it was time to give them a taste of their own medicine. Rihanna informed Ramira's mother that they needed to establish the facts. She reiterated that she wasn't the one who had pushed Ramira. In fact, it was Ramira who had pushed her, causing the food to spill. Rihanna pointed out that the Duchess had crafted this outfit specifically for this ceremony, and now her dragon leather shoes were stained. Ramira and her mother were visibly shocked by this revelation. Rihanna continued her explanation, stating that the shoes she was wearing were made from a type of leather that required daily tanning for 100 years without missing a single day, as it couldn't be treated normally. This was a rare and special process, making the shoes incredibly valuable. She further exaggerated by saying that the shoes were so rare that ordinary people might never see them in their lifetime. Rihanna had fabricated this story to elevate the perceived value of the shoes damaged by Ramira. She then delivered her final blow, informing them that the compensation required would be substantial, and that the Duke's family would send them a certificate of content from the workshop soon. Ramira's mother, in a state of disbelief, asked Rihanna if she had any evidence that her daughter was responsible for all of this. Just then, the boy who had saved Rihanna stepped forward and declared that he was a witness. He revealed that he was the prince of the kingdom of Krija. Rihanna was taken aback, realizing he was indeed a real prince. The prince confirmed that Ramira had pushed Rihanna. Rihanna recalled reading in the novel that the kingdom of Krija was a powerful and friendly nation, mentioned several times in the original story. Ramira's mother's demeanor changed instantly, and she instructed her daughter to apologize to Riene. She also offered her own apologies to Riene. Riene was amazed at how quickly everything had been resolved with just a single word from the prince. Soon, Esmeralda arrived and asked Riene if everything was all right. Riene assured her that everything had been resolved and inquired if Esmeralda was feeling better. Esmeralda expressed her regret for not staying with Riene, but Riene was grateful for the prince's timely intervention and help. Esmeralda mentioned that it was their turn to dance and asked Riene if she was truly okay. Riene replied that if Esme was fine, then they should head to the dance quickly. Esmeralda's mother had been watching the entire scene closely. The prince approached Riene, took her hand in his, and asked her if she would like to be engaged to him. Killian was visibly enraged, and as he looked at his mother, the Duchess, she informed him that today, they should let Riene hang out with other friends as well. The Duchess was adamant that nothing would ruin Riene's romantic endeavors, not even from the very beginning. She was determined to ensure that Riene had a perfect start to her social life. Riene stood there, feeling somewhat out of place, when Esmeralda approached her and asked her to dance. Esmeralda suggested they dance together to refresh themselves and have some fun. Before Riene could respond or take any action, Esmeralda was quickly surrounded by boys who were rushing towards her, eager to dance with Lady Esmeralda. Riene couldn't help but question her own beauty in comparison to Esmeralda's radiant charm. Just then, the prince returned and asked Riene if she would like to dance with him. He formally introduced himself as Heath Krija, the first prince of the kingdom of Krija. Riene immediately remembered him from the novel she had read. Riene introduced herself as Riene Estira from the Estira ducal house and expressed her gratitude to Heath for his previous assistance. The prince gracefully kissed Riene's hand, and she couldn't help but marvel at the refined etiquette of this world. Feeling shy and somewhat flustered for a moment, Heath inquired if he could take her silence as acceptance of his dance request. Riene, though nervous, said yes but mentioned that she wasn't very skilled at dancing. Heath noticed her hesitation and the discomfort in her movements, and they stood there, looking at each other in silence. Riene apologized to Heath for her poor dancing skills and suggested that he should have asked another lady to dance. Heath, however, informed her that he wanted to dance with her specifically because he was genuinely interested in her. Riene pondered in her mind, thinking that Heath was definitely the type of person who would make many women cry later on. Heath then revealed to Riene that he knew her secret. Riene was taken aback for a moment, and Heath elaborated that it was rare for common nobles to witness, but the Krija royal family possessed a dragon leather vest, an heirloom passed down through generations. It was reputed to be the best shield, impervious to everything, from a summer downpour to a hail of arrows on the battlefield, a monster's strike, or even terribly sticky soup. Heath's mention of the dragon leather vest made Riene recall the lie she had told to Ramira and her mother. She admitted that Heath had caught her in her deception. Heath told her he was genuinely impressed by how skillfully she had managed to deceive others. It was the first time he had seen someone his age lie so smoothly. Heath then asked Riene if she would consider being engaged to him. Riene was taken aback by the proposal, thinking it was astonishing to receive 2 proposals in just a few days, something she hadn't experienced even once in her previous life. Riene expressed to Heath that talking about engagement so suddenly was a bit overwhelming. Heath clarified that he wasn't referring to an actual marriage but was proposing a contract engagement. He explained that as the first prince of Krija, his position was precarious due to his mother, the queen, being dethroned, and the succession within the royal family becoming uncertain between him and the second prince, who was born to the new queen. Heath wanted to secure his position through a strategic connection with the Estira ducal house. In return for the engagement, Heath promised to fully support Riene in all social activities, pointing out that despite its power, the Estira family had a weak presence in social circles due to their infrequent participation. Riene considered this and asked if she could receive a monthly cash allowance in her name, thinking that if she wanted to live independently outside the ducal house in the future, cash would be essential. Gold, coins, or items from the ducal house were difficult to manage as a commoner. Heath coughed, and Riene wondered if her request was too much, but Heath agreed and assured her that he could arrange that for her. Riene then mentioned to Heath that, as he might have observed today, she couldn't fully claim to be a complete Estira. She was unsure of how she could truly help him. Heath reassured her, saying that they would surely become perfect partners for each other. He asked her again if she would be willing to be engaged to him. Riene thought she couldn't miss such an opportunity and agreed, but just then, she noticed Killian standing next to her. She knew this was going to be problematic. When Heath brought up the engagement, her little brother Killian was the first thing that came to her mind. She had promised to marry Killian as a joke, and now she worried that if she announced her engagement to someone else, he might start hating her again. With tears in his eyes, Killian asked Rihanna if she was truly getting engaged. Killian turned around and walked away, feeling hurt and betrayed. Heath called out to Rihanna, but she told him they would talk later and rushed after Killian. Killian confronted Rihanna, reminding her that she had promised to marry him. Rihanna tried to explain that her engagement to Heath was not an actual marriage but a strategic move, and that she had her reasons for this decision. Killian asked if engagement was different from marriage. Rihanna explained to her brother that engagement was merely a promise to marry and could be broken. She told Killian that she couldn't fully explain at the moment, but this engagement was very important to her. Killian asked if she was telling the truth this time, and Rihanna assured him it was true and asked him to believe in her. Killian hugged Rihanna tightly, thinking to himself that she had promised to marry him just a few days ago. He started doubting her promises, realizing that if he clung to empty promises, he would eventually lose her. Killian decided that if that was the case, he needed to find a more secure way to keep Rihanna by his side than just a promise. As the years passed, Rihanna and Killian grew up. On the day Rihanna was leaving, Killian looked at her and told her to come back soon. They were both adults now, and Killian told her he would be waiting for her return, a promise that held a deeper meaning in their now complicated relationship. Today was a momentous occasion, the engagement day of Lady Ramira. The atmosphere was filled with excitement and anticipation. The Duchess, sensing something amiss, approached Rihanna and inquired if she was feeling unwell. It had been 9 long years since our female protagonist, Rihanna, had been living this life, having adapted to her new identity. Now, at the age of 16, she had grown into a young woman. During this not-so-short period, one persistent problem remained unresolved. It was now time to address this issue head-on. The problem stemmed from the Duke's steadfast refusal to allow Rihanna to get engaged at a young age. He had argued that discussing engagements at an age when one should be playing freely was nonsensical. Consequently, 9 years had passed, and now it was challenging to find a girl of similar age who wasn't already engaged. Rihanna's concern grew as she worried that Heath might tire of waiting and cancel the contract. This thought caused Rihanna considerable anxiety. The Duchess, noticing Rihanna's tense demeanor, asked if her unease was related to Countess Ramira's daughter, who had a habit of picking on Rihanna at every social gathering. The Duchess's anger flared up as she remembered the countless times Ramira had tormented Rihanna. She told Rihanna firmly that if Ramira dared to do something like that again, she should feel free to stand up for herself. Rihanna, trying to calm the Duchess, assured her that she would handle it. In response, the Duchess gave Rihanna the freedom to retaliate if necessary, even suggesting that a little physical reprimand would be acceptable, and that they would take responsibility for any consequences. Rihanna glanced at Killian and informed him that she would be back soon. Killian, who had always been by Rihanna's side, had suddenly matured significantly, no longer resembling the male protagonist he once was. He now exhibited a politeness and kindness that were quite unexpected. Rihanna often found herself missing the chubby-cheeked, short-tongued child who used to throw tantrums. Meanwhile, a group of ladies had gathered around, congratulating Lady Ramira on her engagement. Manhwa joined the group, adding her congratulations to the mix. Lady Ramira, noticing Rihanna, couldn't resist asking if there was still no good news about her engagement. The annoying daughter of Countess Ramira had been a thorn in Rihanna's side for 9 long years, constantly harassing her. Rihanna pondered whether she should finally take the Duchess's advice and confront her tormentor. Deciding to take action, Rihanna used her acquired noble status to launch a verbal attack on Ramira, having learned a few tricks from the noble brats she had observed. Lady Ramira's eyes caught sight of a bracelet on Rihanna's wrist. She immediately commented on its extravagant flashiness, criticizing Rihanna for wearing something so opulent at Ramira's engagement ceremony. Ramira felt that since it was her special day, Rihanna shouldn't be wearing anything that might outshine her. Rihanna, realizing the faux pas, apologized and asked if there was a place where she could leave the bracelet temporarily until the ceremony concluded. Lady Ramira, seizing the opportunity, offered to keep the bracelet for her, assuring Rihanna that she would store it safely in her waiting room. With a sly smile, Ramira put on the bracelet and admired herself in the mirror, thinking it suited her much better than it did Rihanna. Ramira, who had once dreamt of being an honor-crowned princess, or a duchess, had seen her ambitions thwarted by her malicious and unrefined nature. She blamed others for her failures, and Rihanna had become her primary target during those years. As Ramira was engrossed in admiring the jewelry on her wrist, a voice from behind startled her. "It really suits you," the voice said. It was Killian. He approached Ramira and asked to see her hand. With a charming smile, Killian complimented the jewelry, saying it suited her even more than he had imagined. Ramira was taken aback that Killian had spoken to her. Killian gently took her hand in his, making her heart race. He then expressed regret upon hearing the news of her engagement, a sentiment that left Ramira in shock. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. It was as if her cherished dream had come true. Ramira, her voice trembling with emotion, asked Killian why he was telling her this now, revealing that she had admired him for a long time. Ramira, despite her engagement, hinted that if Killian could wait just a bit longer, they might still have a chance. Killian, maintaining his composure, advised Ramira to calm down and suggested that she show everyone their token of love today. He instructed her to wear the bracelet throughout the engagement ceremony. After a while, Killian returned to the palace and stood near Rihanna and Esmeralda. Rihanna noticed that Killian's face looked pale and asked if he was feeling okay. As she observed him, she couldn't help but marvel at how much they had both grown. She found herself wondering how Killian had become so handsome and realized that it wouldn't be long before he fully embraced his role as the male lead of the original story. Later, Ramira stood on the stage, ready to make an announcement. She began by thanking all the guests for joining them on their joyous day. She spoke eloquently about the celebration of their blossoming love, emphasizing that although it was just the beginning, their love would grow stronger and more enduring than anything else. Throughout her speech, Ramira's gaze kept drifting towards Killian, who was standing beside Rihanna. Rihanna, puzzled, wondered why Ramira kept looking their way and why she was wearing her bracelet. She also noted the insincerity in Ramira's speech, a sentiment that seemed to be shared by Ramira's fiancé, who looked equally bewildered. As the ceremony progressed, Ramira and her fiancé moved to light a candle together. Her fiancé cautioned her to be careful. Suddenly, the flame flared up unexpectedly, heading straight for Ramira's bracelet. As the fire blazed and the flames danced menacingly, panic spread like wildfire among the gathered people. The atmosphere quickly became chaotic as screams and shouts filled the air, creating a cacophony of fear and confusion. Ramira's voice was particularly strident as she called out frantically for help, her eyes wide with terror. Amidst the pandemonium, Rihanna took swift and decisive action. She quickly grabbed a glass of water and, with a steady hand, splashed it onto Ramira. The water hit the flames, and with a hiss, the fire was extinguished. Ramira, now drenched and visibly furious, turned her angry gaze toward Rihanna. Her face was contorted with rage as she began to hurl accusations at Rihanna, claiming that she had orchestrated the entire incident. Ramira insisted that Rihanna had tampered with the bracelet to make it catch fire. Esmeralda, who had been observing the scene intently, noticed that Ramira was wearing Rihanna's bracelet. This revelation piqued her curiosity and suspicion. Esmeralda, seizing the moment, asked Ramira in front of the gathered crowd about the bracelet. The crowd, already on edge, began to murmur and gossip among themselves, their whispers growing louder as speculation spread. Rihanna, maintaining her composure despite the chaotic scene, addressed Ramira calmly. She reminded Ramira that she had given her the bracelet for safekeeping, as Ramira had previously mentioned that it was too gorgeous to wear at an engagement ceremony. Rihanna's words were measured and deliberate, aimed at diffusing the tension. In her defense, Ramira turned to the crowd, her voice rising as she exclaimed that they didn't know the full story. She then turned towards Killian, her eyes pleading for him to support her. Killian, however, remained stoic and unmoved. With a straight face, he stated that he had no idea what Ramira was talking about. Shock washed over Ramira as she stood there, unable to comprehend the betrayal. Esmeralda took the opportunity to clarify the situation further. She announced to everyone that it was Ramira who had asked for the bracelet from Rihanna. Now, Ramira was wearing it proudly without any sense of shame. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, and judgmental glances were cast in Ramira's direction. Ramira, feeling the weight of the crowd's judgment, realized she had been duped by Killian into believing he loved her, and that he had orchestrated the entire situation. Her mind raced as she processed the betrayal and the public humiliation she was enduring. As Ramira began to leave, her head held low, Rihanna couldn't help but reflect on the nature of the nobility. She thought about how nobles struggled to adapt to a society where only self-interest and power mattered. The people standing around continued to murmur, saying how embarrassing it must be for Ramira to walk around after such a scene. Some even questioned her upbringing by the Countess, their words cutting through the air like daggers. Rihanna, observing the reactions, thought once again about the fickle nature of the nobility. They might pretend to be friendly and smile, but they could turn their backs on you in an instant. It was a society where yesterday's allies could become today's enemies. This was a fact she had always known, but it was nonetheless exhausting. Despite everything, Rihanna didn't hold any grudges against Lady Ramira. She picked up the bracelet and examined it closely, still worried about Ramira and wondering if she could just stop and reflect on her actions. Killian, observing Rihanna from a distance, sensed that she was blaming herself for the situation. He approached her gently and suggested that they should leave the scene. That night, as Killian and Rihanna walked outside the palace, the moon shone brightly in the sky, casting a serene glow over the landscape. Rihanna took a moment to thank Killian for his support and help today. Killian responded with a warm smile, saying that as family, it was only natural to support each other. Rihanna noticed a distinct change in Killian's attitude towards her. He treated her with more politeness and maturity than before, a marked difference from his previous demeanor. He no longer wore his emotions on his sleeve as he had when he was younger. Curious about the day's events, Rihanna asked Killian how he had managed to make Lady Ramira wear her bracelet. Killian admitted that it had been quite challenging for him as well. He confessed that he wasn't very good at lying and asked Rihanna for some praise, as today had been particularly tough and exhausting. Rihanna looked at Killian with a mix of affection and amusement, thinking that, despite everything, he still seemed like a kid sometimes. She placed her hand gently on Killian's head and suggested they go home and enjoy some delicious food together. Together, they walked back into the palace, their footsteps echoing softly in the night. Later, Rihanna found herself lost in thought. She was clearly disturbed by something that weighed heavily on her mind. She sat down at her desk and began to write a letter. In the letter, she mentioned that she was doing well and would soon talk to the Duke about their engagement again. This letter was addressed to Heath, a person with whom she had promised an engagement years ago. The process of writing the letter left Rihanna feeling completely exhausted. She realized that there wasn't much time left until the start of the original novel. She took a moment to reflect on how everyone around her was getting engaged, yet she was the only one who hadn't, especially as things were gradually becoming more complicated with Killian. The lack of progress in her independence plan frustrated her immensely. As she felt the weight of her worries, she decided to go for a walk to clear her mind. She left her room quietly, not realizing that Killian had been standing behind her, watching her intently. Once she was gone, Killian entered the room, saw the letter, and seemed to have anticipated its presence. He thought about the ever-present promise of engagement, but as someone determined to overcome all opposition and hardships, a letter from a lover felt extremely dry and impersonal. Killian left the room and stood near the balcony, observing Rihanna as she wandered outside the palace. He noted that his sister's insomnia seemed to be getting worse with each passing day. He consoled himself by thinking that it was just an engagement, and he could break it off at any time if necessary. Rihanna eventually returned from her walk, feeling refreshed and ready to sleep. But when she opened the door, she found Killian standing there, waiting for her. His expression filled with unease. Killian, looking vulnerable, confessed to her that he couldn't sleep and asked if she could help put him to sleep. Rihanna, caught off guard, was initially shocked and asked him again to clarify if he was really asking her to help him sleep. Killian, maintaining his sincerity, reminded her that she too had been struggling with sleepless nights lately and offered to help put her to sleep as well. Rihanna, flustered, shouted at him, questioning how he could make such a request and bringing up his age to emphasize her point. Killian, trying to ease the tension, told her that he had a frightening nightmare that scared him deeply. He then made a cute, pleading face and asked his sister if she was going to coldly reject her only younger brother in such a manner. Rihanna thought to herself that his adorable tactics wouldn't work on her forever, yet Killian added earnestly that since they were family, they should support each other, especially during times like these. After some time, it seemed like Rihanna couldn't resist Killian's persistence, and they ended up lying in beds next to each other. As they settled down, Rihanna reflected that, in the end, she had lost the argument once again. She mentally retracted her earlier thoughts that Killian had matured significantly. After a few minutes of silence, Killian broke the quiet, asking Rihanna if she was still troubled about not being engaged yet and if that was contributing to her sleeplessness. Rihanna admitted that, as everyone else around her was getting engaged, it did bother her a bit that her engagement had been postponed. Rihanna was taken aback because Killian had always been very sensitive about the topic of engagement, yet here he was, bringing it up himself. Killian then asked Rihanna if he could do something to help her with this issue, prompting Rihanna to turn towards him with a mix of surprise and curiosity. Killian suggested that he could talk to their father about it. Rihanna stood up, hardly able to believe what she was hearing. She knew that if Killian spoke to the Duke, he might indeed permit the engagement. Rihanna told Killian that his help would be great for her, but she questioned his sudden willingness to assist. Killian revealed that there was something he wanted her to do in return. When Rihanna asked what he needed, Killian replied that once she became an adult, she should leave the dukedom. Rihanna was deeply shocked, a wave of emotions hitting her. She had a flashback of all the time she had spent in the mansion with everyone, especially Killian. Rihanna thought that she had been planning to leave anyway and was destined to die, so being kicked out didn't seem like such a big deal. She agreed with Killian, promising to leave the dukedom when she reached adulthood. Killian, satisfied, said that it was a deal now and returned to his side of the bed. He asked Rihanna, with a hint of sadness, if that meant they wouldn't be family anymore when the time came. At this point, Rihanna had tears in her eyes. She couldn't understand why she was crying since everything was going according to her plan, yet the sadness was overwhelming. After a while, she found herself standing next to the Duke, who agreed to her engagement, acknowledging that she had turned 16 this year. Rihanna was overjoyed. The Duke reminisced, saying it felt like just yesterday when they had brought her to him, back when she was only up to his knees. He also told Rihanna that regardless of her engagement or marriage, if she ever wanted to return, she should let him know, as there would always be a place for her in the dukedom. Rihanna thanked the Duke wholeheartedly for everything. A few days later, it was finally the day of Rihanna's engagement. Esmeralda arrived and congratulated Rihanna warmly. Esmeralda expressed her relief, acknowledging that Rihanna had been through a lot, but now things seemed to be looking up. Esmeralda's mother also came and offered her congratulations. The Marchioness commented that she had been thinking for a while, and believed that the princess and the prince made a wonderful match. She also hoped that Esmeralda would soon meet a good person. Rihanna reassured them that she would definitely meet a wonderful man who would surpass anyone else. Rihanna knew in her heart that the male lead of the novel would be her husband. As she thought about Killian, she realized she hadn't seen him for several days. She didn't expect Killian to miss her engagement ceremony, yet here she was, feeling his absence keenly. The Marchioness also inquired about Killian, noting that he must be very upset to miss his only sister's engagement ceremony, and it must be disappointing for him not to attend. Rihanna explained that Killian was busy these days but remembered his words about not being family anymore after she left. Rihanna pondered if Killian no longer saw her as his older sister. Rihanna and Heath stood next to each other, and Heath reassured her that he would do his best for her and asked her to trust him. Rihanna thanked him sincerely, acknowledging that he had already done so much for her. She thought that thanks to this engagement, the issue of her independence was resolved at once. Now, she just needed to fulfill her role as the fiancé. Everything seemed to be going very smoothly. Heath noticed that Rihanna appeared as if she was about to cry and asked her if she was all right. Rihanna responded that she was just very happy to finally be getting engaged. After the engagement, Rihanna realized she had no recollection of what dress she wore, what food she ate, or what gifts she received. After some time, Heath was escorted to his room by a servant. The servant, who had come to drop him off, politely told him to enjoy his stay and make himself comfortable. Heath thanked the servant and, as soon as the door closed behind him, he took a moment to look around the room. It was elegantly furnished and quite spacious. Just as he was starting to feel at ease, he noticed someone standing beside him. To his surprise, it was none other than Killian Estira. Killian greeted Heath with a friendly smile. But Heath was immediately taken aback and asked him, with a hint of suspicion, what he was doing in this room without anyone's permission. Killian, seemingly uninterested in addressing Heath's concern, ignored the question and instead remarked that Heath had gotten a pretty good room. He hoped Heath was satisfied with it. Heath, not content with this evasive response, pressed further and asked Killian what he really wanted to say. Killian then brought up the topic of Heath's engagement with his sister, Rihanna. He expressed his curiosity about whether Heath intended to use her for political purposes. Killian, who clearly did not believe in the concept of love at first sight, reminded Heath that he had first met Rihanna 9 years ago at Gunkyukai. Killian continued to press Heath, asking how many times he had met Rihanna since that initial encounter. He claimed that what Heath was feeling couldn't possibly be love, and that the notion was completely ridiculous. Heath, trying to defend himself, explained to Killian that he had indeed made contact with Rihanna. But things were different now. He insisted that he was more loyal to Rihanna than anyone else. He assured Killian that he had been sincere from the very beginning and explained that, regardless of what had happened, Rihanna was now officially registered as his wife. He added that since Rihanna had not given up on him, he had made the decision not to give up on her either. As Heath was preparing to leave the room, Killian, with a peculiar and somewhat unsettling smile on his face, asked Heath what he should do now. Meanwhile, in her own room, Rihanna was feeling very frustrated. She was deeply upset that Killian hadn't attended his only sister's engagement. She couldn't quite understand why she was feeling so distressed over someone else's absence. Reflecting on her emotions, she realized that it was because she was his only sister, and that was why she felt so upset. Trying to shake off these thoughts, she decided not to dwell on it, but the feeling lingered, making her even more upset. Suddenly, Killian appeared in her room, startling her with his sudden entrance. Riene, looking at him in surprise, was shocked by his sudden appearance. Killian quickly apologized for not being able to attend the engagement. Riene, still angry, told him that his absence had actually made it a perfect engagement, and that it had been such a perfect and fun day without him. She then told Killian that she was tired and wanted to sleep, asking him to leave. Killian, however, had come prepared with a gift to apologize for his absence. To make it more appealing, he mentioned that he had prepared it with shiny things, knowing how much she liked them. Riene's mood suddenly changed, and she decided to accept the gift for the sake of his sincerity. After agreeing to accept his gift, Killian moved closer to Riene and, gently but firmly, grabbed her by the waist. In an instant, they found themselves standing in a completely different place. It was a beautiful pond, shimmering brightly under the night sky. Although it was different from the sparkly things Riene usually liked, it was undeniably beautiful and enchanting. Riene couldn't help but praise Killian for his thoughtful choice. Killian then admitted that he wasn't truly sorry for not attending her engagement. His only regret was that he hadn't had the chance to dance with her, so he asked if they could dance now. Riene, feeling a mix of emotions, gave him permission, and they started dancing together. As they danced, Riene found it hard to believe that her brother, who was so sweet and cute to her, was destined to become the cruel Killian from the original novel. While they were dancing, Killian asked Riene if he had given her a hard time when they were young. She joked that he hadn't troubled her even a bit, but then admitted that he had caused her a lot of trouble, although he was pretty cute. Killian then asked if she still found him cute. Riene, deep in thought, recalled that in the original story, Killian was going to become a sociopath who killed people and overthrew the Duke and Duchess. However, while they were having this lovely conversation, she wondered if the story had changed since she had been possessed. She pondered if her presence had made Killian change, even just a little. But soon, her optimistic thoughts came to an abrupt end when Killian asked her to keep the promise of being independent. The following day, outside the grand palace of the Duke, a significant number of people and servants had gathered. Several carriages stood lined up, their presence indicating the importance of the day. Eliza, who was Riene's personal maid, approached her with a concerned expression and informed her that they would require at least 2 more carriages to transport everything they needed. Riene and Eliza were preparing to leave for the academy. Eliza, deeply concerned for Riene's well-being, wanted to ensure that she was comfortable and well prepared for her new life at the academy. Riene, however, was doing her best to dissuade Eliza from bringing too many things from the household. The Duke and Duchess observed from a distance, satisfied with their choice of maid, and the Duchess decided that Eliza deserved a raise for her dedication. The Duke and Duchess were anxious about Riene's transition to the academy and expressed their concerns. They asked Riene if she was certain she wanted to pursue an aristocratic education, suggesting that children also need time to play and enjoy themselves. Riene had anticipated this reaction from them, as they reminded her of a foreign rapper from a past life who used to claim that they had enough money to last until their daughter's death. They intended to raise their daughter to be spoiled and indulged, without the pressures of a demanding education. The Duke and Duchess had similar intentions. They wanted Riene to enjoy her life without being burdened by the pressures of rigorous academic demands. Riene reassured the Duke and Duchess that she would be fine and that she would return to visit them soon. The Duke, still concerned, told Riene that if she was truly insistent on going, she could do so, but he encouraged her to come back if she ever felt bored or lonely. Riene took her leave and began her journey to the academy. The Duke asked Riene to visit often on weekends and during school holidays, which Riene agreed to, before finally leaving the palace. After some time, they arrived at the academy. It was a magnificent institution, with grand architecture and an impressive facade. The students at the academy were abuzz with gossip about Riene's enrollment. It was a rare occurrence for a princess to attend their academy, and the students were fascinated and curious. Some students even whispered among themselves, questioning whether a commoner like Riene deserved such lavish treatment and whether the number of carriages was excessive for someone of her status. Eliza, who was close by, overheard the gossip and grew increasingly angry. She clenched her fists in frustration, feeling a strong urge to confront the students and defend Riene. Fortunately, Riene intervened, asking Eliza not to act so impulsively and to avoid childish behavior. Just then, the principal of the academy, Master Grills, made his appearance. He addressed Riene with a solemn tone, informing her that he had received more than 20 threatening letters from the Duke over the past 3 months. The letters contained threats of severe consequences if the academy did not treat the princess with the utmost respect and care. The Duke had warned that any slight issue with Riene would result in the academy being shut down. Master Grills had taken these warnings seriously and was well prepared for Riene's arrival. He assured Riena that her dormitory room was a top-of-the-line suite, with furniture crafted by renowned artisans from the East Coast. Additionally, Riene's school uniform was made from the finest materials, embroidered in her personal colors. Riena was taken aback by the extravagance and felt it was unnecessary, but Eliza agreed to everything on her behalf. She mentioned that, as the Duke's representative, she would take a closer look at the arrangements and report back to the Duke. Riena reflected on the situation and realized that these circumstances might cause her to become more wicked than the original Riene. This was how her first day at the academy unfolded. Exhausted from the day's events and the constant squabbles between Eliza and the principal, Riena lay on her bed, feeling completely worn out. Despite the exhaustion, she quickly fell into a deep and restful sleep. However, her rest was interrupted when she saw Killian sitting next to her. At first, Riena could hardly believe her eyes and thought she might be dreaming. But as she fully opened her eyes, she was shocked to see Killian sitting beside her on the bed. Riena had not seen Killian since the day of the engagement ceremony, and she asked him where he had been. Killian explained that he had avoided returning home because he feared for his safety if his mother found out he had skipped the engagement. Riena was surprised to learn that Killian had been away from home for so long and had essentially been homeless since the engagement. Riena urged Killian to return home, as their mother would undoubtedly be worried about him. However, Killian was more fearful of his mother's collection of weapons and was reluctant to go back. He asked Riena if he could stay with her for a while, but Riene, feeling frustrated, told him it was not possible due to the limited space, only one room and one bed. Killian argued that they had shared a bed many times before, but Riena pointed out that things had changed. They were now adults, not children anymore. Killian then decided to find an empty classroom to stay in and left the room. Before departing, he told Riena that he would visit often. Riena was taken aback by how quickly he had understood the situation. Meanwhile, Killian stood outside the room, feeling a sense of embarrassment about the entire situation. Today marked the beginning of Riene's academic journey at the academy, a milestone she approached with a blend of trepidation and eagerness. Killian's firm insistence had propelled her here, and despite her initial reluctance, a part of her was secretly thrilled about what lay ahead. As she entered the classroom, her heart pounded, a mixture of anxiety and excitement swirling within her. To her immense relief, she spotted Esmeralda, who approached her with a radiant smile. Their warm greeting was filled with genuine happiness, and this unexpected reunion immediately lifted Riene's spirits, making the daunting prospect of the academy seem much more bearable. Esmeralda, ever observant, quickly noticed Riene's well-preparedness. She had brought along all the necessary books and items required for her studies, which prompted Esmeralda to comment on her apparent dedication and passion for learning. This praise made Riena blush slightly, but she felt a surge of pride. Despite the less-than-ideal circumstances that had brought her to the academy, Riena was determined to prove her worth. After all, she was a former graduate student with much to offer, and she intended to showcase her true potential. Esmeralda continued to shower Riena with praises, particularly highlighting her enthusiasm for academics. Riena found herself basking in this attention, feeling increasingly confident about her decision to attend the academy. Just as their conversation was becoming more engaging, the door opened, and Miss Potts, the teacher, walked in. She commanded the room's attention immediately, asking everyone to settle down as she was about to begin the class on Imperial History. Miss Potts then announced that, being the first day, she would administer a simple test to gauge everyone's knowledge. This announcement sent a wave of worry through Riene, as she knew next to nothing about the Empire's history. Miss Potts elaborated that she would call on each student individually to answer a question. As Riena listened, her mind drifted back to her childhood memories. She recalled the times she had attempted to read history books, only to have the Duchess discard them in favor of romantic novels. The Duchess had never pressured her to study anything she didn't like, a luxury Riena now regretted, given her current predicament. The first question was directed at Riene, asking her to state the year the Empire was founded. Riena realized it was a straightforward question and suspected that Miss Potts had received a letter from the Duke, similar to the principal. Confidently, she answered that the year was 1392. However, this answer was incorrect. Esmeralda's worry was palpable, but Miss Potts skillfully turned the situation around, making Riene's answer seem valid. She explained that while the Empire was officially founded in 1786, a significant event indeed occurred in 1392, which made Riene's response quite reasonable. The classroom was left in stunned silence, impressed by the teacher's explanation. In the same classroom sat Ramira, who didn't hesitate to challenge Miss Potts. She pointed out that there couldn't have been a significant event in 1392 if it was before the Empire's founding. Rhaenyra clearly had no intention of letting Rhaena off easily. Miss Potts acknowledged Rhaenyra's sharp observation but decided to prioritize the Duke's influence. She explained that 1392 was the year when the first emperor, His Majesty and sisters, was born, and without him there wouldn't be an empire. This explanation left everyone in the classroom amazed and bewildered. Feeling the weight of the day, Rhaena already wanted to go home. After some time, all the young ladies were gathered outside on the grounds where Madame Janov, their life mentor, awaited them. Madame Janov addressed the group, explaining that they were there to prepare for the upcoming charity party. She inquired if anyone was willing to volunteer for the position of team leader. Without hesitation, Rhaena raised her hand, sparking a flurry of whispers among the other students. They noted that Lady Rhaena didn't typically enjoy parties, yet they acknowledged that when it came to hosting, wealth was the most crucial factor, and Rhaena certainly had plenty of it. Rhaena had her reasons for volunteering. She was determined to gradually build her influence and ensure that Heath could become the crown prince. Madame Janov then asked if anyone else wanted to volunteer. This time, Rhaenyra raised her hand, pledging to invest generously to lead the charity party to success. In the end, it was decided that both Rhaena and Rhaenyra would host the party together. This arrangement sparked much anticipation among their peers, who looked forward to a great event from both young ladies. Later that night, Killian found himself in Rhaena's room, trying to understand what was troubling his sister. Rhaena felt a twinge of guilt for allowing her younger brother to stay out overnight, so she had eventually permitted him to stay in her room. Despite this, she kept urging Killian to return home. Killian, however, insisted that he should be by his sister's side during her difficult times. As Rhaena combed her hair, Killian took the comb from her and offered to do it for her. Rhaena was puzzled by his actions, unsure of what was going through his mind. Killian mentioned that the act reminded him of their childhood, making Rhaena realize that despite the changes and the boundaries now between them, she was still his sister in his memories. Killian asked again what was bothering her. Rhaena explained that she had become the team leader of the charity party team and had to choose the team members the next day. She was anxious about whether she could select the people she wanted. Killian offered his help, but Rhaena was unsure how he could assist her. Killian, with a determined look in his eyes, reassured her that he could do anything for her, no matter what it took. This reassurance gave Rhaena a small measure of comfort, knowing that her brother was willing to support her in any way possible. Today was a highly anticipated day, as each team leader would select the members who would assist them in preparing for the grand party. This annual event always turned into a spirited challenge between the two leaders, Rhaena and Rhaenyra. The selection process was quite unique, with the team members being chosen through a rock-paper-scissors challenge between the team leaders. This method was regarded as completely fair, with no room for manipulation, ensuring that both leaders had an equal chance of assembling their ideal teams. The rules were simple. The winning leader would pick one person at a time. The challenge began, and the tension in the air was palpable. In the first round, Lady Rhaena emerged victorious. She was visibly elated to win the initial round, and she chose Esmeralda, who beamed with happiness at being selected. Esmeralda was equally thrilled to join Rhaena's team, feeling honored and excited. Rhaenyra, on the other hand, was visibly frustrated. She had been unable to predict Rhaena's moves and felt annoyed by her own failure. As the challenge continued, Rhaenyra won the second round. She chose Count Andover's daughter, which did not come as a surprise to anyone. The Andover family had recently come into a significant fortune through their business ventures, and it was clear that Lady Rhaenyra was prioritizing wealth over her usual friendships. Rhaena silently observed Rhaenyra's choice, thinking how shameless Rhaenyra was to be so easily swayed by money. The rock-paper-scissors challenge continued with mounting excitement. In the subsequent rounds, Rhaenyra's luck held, and she won again. Rhaena, who had only won the first round, lost the last two rounds to Rhaenyra. Despite this, Rhaena congratulated her rival with a gracious smile. However, in reality, Lady Rhaenyra had no idea that Rhaena had intentionally won only the first round and then deliberately lost the others. Rhaena had anticipated that Lady Rhaenyra would prioritize selecting girls from wealthy families. For her own plans, Rhaena needed young ladies from either small families or rural areas. She understood that if she kept winning and only picked girls with weaker social positions, it might raise suspicion. Thus, it was part of Rhaena's strategy to lose intentionally. The previous night, when Killian offered his help to Rhaena, he mentioned that he could read minds. This revelation worried Rhaena, as she feared that Killian knew everything about her inner thoughts and plans. Fortunately, Killian was only joking. Despite the scare, Rhaena appreciated Killian's sharp foresight. He had an uncanny ability to understand what Lady Ramira would choose, even from the slightest movements. Standing discreetly behind a tree, Killian indicated to Rihanna the next hand Ramira was likely to play. This assistance proved invaluable to Rihanna's plan. As the challenge drew to a close, it was time for Ramira to choose the final member for her team. Everyone expected her to pick her best friend, Douglas's daughter. However, to everyone's surprise, Ramira chose Myrna's daughter instead. The decision left everyone confused and shocked, as it deviated from the expected norm. After the selections, Rihanna gathered everyone around a meeting table. She expressed her gratitude for the opportunity to plan the party together with such a diverse group. Rihanna promised to do her utmost to ensure a successful event. She also informed everyone that the real party preparations would commence the following day, and instructed everyone to meet in front of the main gate after their classes. Meanwhile, Ramira was engaged in a private conversation with Lady Douglas. Ramira was adamant that the charity party needed to be a resounding success. Lady Douglas, however, was unhappy with Ramira's decision not to choose her. Ramira explained that it was part of her strategy to send Lady Douglas to Rihanna's team to act as a spy and report back on Rihanna's preparations. Ramira had no intention of allowing a commoner to plan a flawless party without knowing every detail of her steps. In exchange for her espionage efforts, Ramira promised Lady Douglas that if she performed this task perfectly, she would introduce her to a respectable gentleman who was friends with her fiancé. Lady Douglas accepted the deal and vowed to do her best. Unbeknownst to them, Killian was perched above them on a branch, listening intently to every word of their conversation. Meanwhile, in a carriage, Rihanna's team was en route to an unknown destination. The roads were rough, and the path ahead seemed intimidating. Everyone was anxious and kept questioning if they were on the right track. However, Rihanna reassured them repeatedly, urging them to relax as they were close to their destination. After a few more minutes, they arrived and Rihanna asked everyone to disembark from the carriage. The team members were stunned when they saw the venue. It was St. Margaret's House Orphanage. Rihanna warmly introduced everyone to the venue for their highly anticipated charity event, St. Margaret House Nursery. The nursery was a bright and lively place, filled with the cheerful sounds of children playing and engaging in various educational activities. The vibrant atmosphere was truly captivating. After a while, the volunteers were seen mingling with the children, fully immersed in the joy of teaching. Some of the volunteers took on the task of instructing the students on how to properly hold a pen, ensuring that they had a good grip and proper posture. Others patiently guided the children on how to write their own names, focusing on letter formation and careful penmanship. The environment resembled that of a classroom, with everyone dedicated to imparting valuable literacy skills to the children, especially the orphans, helping them learn how to read and write. Douglas observed the scene from a distance, his curiosity piqued by the unfolding events. He approached Rihanna, inquiring about her goals for the charity event. Rihanna took a moment to explain that this initiative was grounded in the principle of noblesse oblige, a fundamental lesson she had learned at the academy. She elaborated that the purpose of the charity event was to translate this lesson into actionable practice, showing that even those from privileged backgrounds had a responsibility to contribute positively to society. Rihanna then made an announcement that she would be assuming the role of a temporary teacher, dedicating her time to instructing the children at the nursery. As the event progressed, a young girl called out to Douglas, seeking his opinion on whether she had written something correctly. The little girl, with hopeful eyes, extended her work towards him. However, Douglas's reaction was unexpectedly harsh. He abruptly slapped her hand away and began shouting at her. His outburst was both severe and uncalled for. Rihanna, witnessing the distressing scene, quickly intervened. She rushed over to Douglas, firmly grabbing his hand and instructing him to leave the room immediately, stating that he was unqualified to be a teacher. Douglas, visibly angered, retorted that he had intended to leave anyway, expressing his disdain for lowering himself to teach what he considered to be beggars. Rihanna, undeterred by his hostility, led him out of the classroom and gave him clear instructions to either remain in the carriage or stand outside the door. She made it unequivocally clear that he was not to re-enter the classroom. With a resolute gesture, Rihanna shut the door firmly behind him, making her stance unmistakable. Later, Rihanna sat beside the student who had been reprimanded by Douglas and offered a heartfelt apology to the little girl. The girl, named Anna, responded with a brave smile, reassuring Rihanna that it was alright and mentioning that she was accustomed to being called names. This innocent comment tugged at Rihanna's heartstrings. Determined to uplift Anna's spirits, Rihanna leaned in and shared a playful secret. Teacher Douglas hadn't bathed for months. Anna, skeptical, argued that the teacher didn't appear unkempt. Rihanna explained that Douglas's use of strong perfume masked the odor, but if someone got too close, the unpleasant smell would become noticeable. Anna listened with curiosity. The other ladies present, who had been eavesdropping on Rihanna's story, chuckled at her imaginative tale. Anna, intrigued, asked why Teacher Douglas didn't bathe. Rihanna concocted a whimsical story, explaining that Douglas had once fallen into the water and had since developed an extreme aversion to it, to the point where he couldn't tolerate having water touch his body. Anna listened intently, her eyes wide with fascination at the inventive explanation. Rihanna reassured Anna, telling her not to be disheartened. Despite the playful story, Anna still felt a pang of sympathy for Douglas. As the class concluded, everyone felt rejuvenated and invigorated. The ladies discussed how much more enjoyable and fulfilling the day had been compared to their initial expectations, eagerly sharing their experiences and observations. Rihanna reflected on how well everyone had performed, surpassing her initial hopes. She thought back to her previous life as a teacher and realized she had unconsciously mirrored her former mentor's teaching style, with the notable exception of Douglas. Impressed by the group's dedication and efforts, Rihanna decided to reward them for their hard work. She distributed small gifts, beautiful brooches, to everyone except Douglas. One of the ladies, admiring her gift, inquired whether it was truly made of diamonds, while Douglas looked on with envy. After the gift-giving, Rihanna praised the group for their excellent work and informed them that they would reconvene next week in front of the main gate of the daycare center. As the ladies prepared to head home, Douglas was also getting ready to leave. Eliza and Rihanna observed him from a distance. Eliza, sensing that Douglas was up to something dubious, expressed a desire to follow him, but Rihanna advised her to stay calm and suggested it wasn't worth worrying about. Douglas proceeded straight to Ramira, recounting the day's events in detail. He also revealed Rihanna's upcoming plans. Ramira, with a scheming expression, instructed Douglas to create a significant disruption next time, one large enough to get himself banned from the daycare center. She believed that such an incident would thwart Rihanna's plans and provide Douglas with a sense of vindication. Later, Eliza was seen standing vigil outside Rihanna's room. Noticing something suspicious, she grabbed a small sword, prepared to defend if necessary. However, she soon realized that the person entering the room was Killian. Eliza, surprised and somewhat on edge, asked Killian what he was doing in the princess's room, accusing him of taking advantage of the absence of its owner. Killian, unfazed by her confrontation, reassured Eliza to relax. He explained that his sister had permitted him to stay in the room since he was currently without a home. He also reminded Eliza of his position as the heir of the family she served, which brought a touch of humility to her demeanor. Killian's purpose for being there was more pressing. He had observed that the noble ladies were conspiring to create trouble for Rihanna. Hearing this, Eliza's anger flared, and she demanded to know the identities of the culprits. Killian, weary of the constant scheming, assured her that he would manage the situation and requested her assistance with a different matter altogether. The next morning, Eliza was found sitting in the carriage alongside Rihanna. Despite being explicitly instructed not to follow her everywhere, Eliza remained insistent on protecting Rihanna. She believed it was her duty to be by Rihanna's side at all times. Eliza explained to Rihanna that she should have been with her from the very beginning, as her primary role was to ensure Rihanna's safety. Realizing that Eliza was already there, Rihanna decided it would be beneficial if Eliza could teach the children something valuable. Eliza confidently declared that she possessed a variety of useful skills, such as the ability to clean broken bones, reassemble them, paralyze someone with just 2 fingers, and perform numerous other techniques. The other ladies in the carriage, upon hearing this, were visibly frightened by Eliza's formidable capabilities. As soon as the class for the orphan children commenced, Anna approached Douglas. Rihanna, observing this interaction, discreetly signaled Eliza, who swiftly moved towards Douglas and placed her hand over Douglas's mouth to prevent any potential disturbance. Rihanna also took her place beside Eliza. Anna was holding a bottle of water, which she intended to give to Douglas. Her pure intention was to help Douglas overcome her fear of water. Douglas, however, initially perceived the gift as insignificant and thought it was a trivial gesture. To ensure Anna did not feel hurt, Rihanna reassured her that Douglas viewed the bottle as a very precious gift and was genuinely grateful for it. Anna further explained that she had learned the previous day that Douglas had been unable to see for several months due to her fear of water, which made her very sad. Douglas, wanting to object, found herself unable to do so due to Eliza's watchful presence. Rihanna then praised Anna for being the first to show care towards Douglas, noting that everyone else had been avoiding her. She also mentioned that Douglas had no friends. Hearing this, Anna felt deeply saddened and took Douglas's hand in a gesture of friendship, promising to be her friend from that day forward. From then on, Anna stayed by Douglas's side every moment. She brought her water, attended to the garden by watering the flowers, and even brought juice for Douglas. Anna thoroughly enjoyed her time with Douglas and found great satisfaction in being with her. Douglas, under the watchful eye of Eliza, was unable to react negatively to Anna's kindness. When it was time for Anna to leave, she expressed that she had a wonderful time and was delighted to be friends with Douglas. She assured Douglas that even if she were unable to see for 100 years, she would never avoid her, and encouraged her to return next time. As Douglas exited the room, Rihanna handed her a brooch and kindly asked her to take care in the upcoming week. Meanwhile, in her own room, Esmeralda was confronted by her mother, who questioned her about why she was not hosting the charity party. Esmeralda apologized for the oversight, but her mother was not merely seeking an apology. Her mother emphasized that while it was one thing for the princess to hold the position, having it taken by Lady Ramira was unacceptable. She inquired about Esmeralda's thought process during this critical time, when it was crucial to solidify her social standing. Esmeralda explained that she believed it would be more advantageous to assist the princess closely. Her mother cautioned her not to become overly involved in her friendship with the princess. Esmeralda's mother then held her face firmly and asked if the prince had ever replied to the letter she had sent. Her mother advised her not to rely solely on incomplete spells, as there needed to be a basic attraction for the spell to be effective. She instructed Esmeralda to make a strong and lasting impression on the Duke and Duchess at the charity party. Later, all the ladies in Rihanna's team were informed that their charity party would also serve as a venue for the children's presentations. This event would provide the children with an opportunity to gain new experiences, build confidence, and contribute to raising funds for constructing a school. The ladies agreed that, since they were currently conducting classes temporarily, it would be even more beneficial if the children could attend a formal school. The children were thrilled at the prospect of making presentations. Rihanna inquired if Anna would be participating, but Anna, lacking confidence, expressed doubt about her ability to give a good presentation. To Anna's surprise, Douglas encouraged her, convincing her that she was capable of delivering a successful presentation. This encouragement boosted Anna's confidence, and she decided that she would definitely participate. As Douglas was leaving the orphanage, she was suddenly stopped by a woman who held the prestigious position of the principal. This principal warmly thanked her for taking such good care of Anna. She went on to explain how Anna had experienced severe trauma after her parents tragically passed away. Her relatives had neglected her and bullied her, frequently calling her dirty. This cruel mistreatment led Anna to compulsively try to clean herself, even after arriving at the orphanage, as she was convinced she was dirty. However, during her time with Douglas, Anna had completely overcome her trauma. The principal was deeply grateful and wanted to express her heartfelt appreciation to Douglas, acknowledging the positive transformation in Anna's life. Finally, the long-awaited day of the charity party arrived. The atmosphere was filled with anticipation and excitement. Lady Douglas was approached by Ramira, who inquired with a hint of curiosity if the child was coming today. Ramira also confided in Douglas, sharing that her family's financial situation had not been good lately. She emphasized that during such challenging times, it was crucial for people to support each other. Ramira then asked Douglas to follow her instructions closely, promising that if she did as she was told, Ramira's influential father would assist them in their current predicament. Douglas, feeling the weight of the request, asked what exactly she should do. Ramira explained her devious plan. A mischievous maid would steal the Marchioness's valuable necklace, and all Douglas needed to do was place the necklace in the pocket of a common girl named Anna. When Anna was giving her presentation, Douglas was supposed to discreetly cut her pocket with a knife, causing the necklace to fall out in front of everyone. Douglas was left speechless and deeply conflicted after hearing this morally questionable plan. At the event, the atmosphere was vibrant and lively. Everyone was praising Rihanna's exquisite dress, commenting on how stunning and elegant she looked. Some of the ladies were also gossiping about how this place used to be a gloomy orphanage, but now it was bustling with life, filled with many distinguished guests. Rihanna graciously welcomed the King of Krija, who was Heath's father. Rihanna was extremely nervous in the presence of the king, trying her best to maintain composure. The king praised Rihanna for the excellent arrangements she had made, expressing his happiness that she was so invested in education. He also mentioned that the party had a noble purpose, enhancing its significance. Riene, in an effort to portray a positive image of Heath, told the king that it was Heath's brilliant idea. However, Heath interjected, saying there was a misunderstanding and that the party was planned from beginning to end by Princess Riene. The king, impressed by her dedication and efforts, praised her again before taking his leave. Riene turned to Heath, expressing that she thought she was going to die from nervousness, but Heath was unaware of her internal turmoil. She confided in Heath that it was a good idea to prepare the party according to the king's interests, hoping it would be well received. Heath, curious about her motivations, asked if she did all of this to get into his father's good graces. Riene admitted that she did, explaining that it was her first official event as Heath's fiancée, and she wanted to make a positive impression. She explained that she was trying to make him look good in the eyes of others. Heath realized that this was the reason she had been so busy lately, preparing meticulously for the event. Riene, reflecting on their contractual relationship, questioned if she had been acting too independently without consulting him. She apologized to Heath if her actions made him uncomfortable by planning the party without his input. But Heath, ever understanding, reassured her, saying, "Riene, you don't have to work so hard, and you don't have to lie for my sake." He told Riene that he didn't want his existence to become a burden for her, valuing her well-being over appearances. They were standing very close to each other, and Riene told Heath that he was the best partner ever. Their mutual understanding deepened as they both agreed to help each other and become the best partners they could be. After some time, Anna approached Douglas, noticing her pensive demeanor. She gently asked if Douglas was nervous about the upcoming presentation. Anna, with her usual optimism, tried to motivate Douglas by saying that everything was all right, and that they could do this together. Douglas, trying to hide her own nerves, told Anna that she was not nervous at all and playfully pinched her cheeks, eliciting a giggle from Anna. Anna, smiling brightly, told Douglas that she was going to do great, infusing her with confidence. As they both looked at Ramira, Anna curiously asked if Ramira was the one who had said mean things to Douglas about being dirty. Anna remarked that Ramira looked like someone who would say such hurtful things. Placing her hand gently on Douglas's hand, Anna assured her that she would always be with her and protect her, no matter what happened. Touched by Anna's sincere words, Douglas and Anna hugged each other tightly, drawing strength from their bond. Later, in a secluded room away from the prying eyes of the guests, Ramira asked Douglas if she was ready for their plan. Ramira had managed to get hold of the stolen Marchioness's necklace and reminded Douglas about the intricate plan they had discussed that morning. Ramira expressed her malicious desire to show everyone how dirty and vile these children from the orphanage were, believing it would serve her purpose. She also promised Douglas that if she executed the plan properly, she would be rewarded with something more valuable than the necklace. However, as Ramira was elaborating on the details of the plan, Douglas, with a newfound resolve, firmly refused, saying that she couldn't go through with it. Ramira was shocked by her defiance and demanded to know what she meant by her refusal. Douglas, facing Ramira with unwavering determination, told her that if she planned to do anything foolish to Anna, she would not stand by and let it happen. After delivering this resolute message, Douglas turned and left the room, leaving Ramira seething with anger. Overwhelmed by her rage, Ramira started shouting at Douglas's retreating figure, hurling insults and mean-spirited comments. In her fit of anger, the necklace slipped from her pocket and clattered to the floor. Just as she was about to pick it up, someone approached from behind and asked her what she was doing. Startled and caught off guard, Ramira froze, filled with a sudden sense of fear at being discovered. While Lady Ramira was carefully picking up the fallen necklace from the ground, Esmeralda's mother approached her with a concerned expression. She inquired about what Ramira was doing in that particular spot, noting that the party was about to start and expressing curiosity about Ramira's presence at such a critical time. Esmeralda's mother's gaze fell on the necklace in Ramira's hand, and she realized it belonged to Marchioness Annery. With a tone of familiarity and authority, Esmeralda's mother explained that the necklace was a highly treasured family heirloom, handed down through generations from her great-aunt. It held immense sentimental value to her. Esmeralda's mother then asked Ramira directly why she was in possession of such an important item and proceeded to accuse her, remarking that someone of Ramira's refinement should not be handling someone else's belongings without explicit permission. She conveyed her disappointment, implying that such behavior was beneath someone of her social standing. Attempting to clear her name, Ramira hastily offered an explanation. She claimed that she had merely stumbled upon the necklace and intended to return it to its rightful owner. Esmeralda's mother, however, was not entirely convinced by this explanation. She pointed out that a necklace of such a valuable nature could not simply fall off on its own. Her suspicion grew, and she questioned whether it was possible that the necklace had been stolen and subsequently found by Remira. In a bid to deflect suspicion, Remira quickly fabricated a story. She mentioned that one of the children from the orphanage, known for their quick and nimble fingers, might have taken the necklace. She added that the child was so swift that she lost sight of him almost immediately. Esmeralda's mother, although skeptical, decided that immediate action was necessary. She proposed that they should track down the child and hold him accountable for his alleged theft. However, she also recognized that without solid evidence, leaving the scene as it was might lead others to believe that Remira herself was the thief. Esmeralda's mother, thinking on her feet, devised a plan to resolve the situation. She informed Remira that she would assist her in framing one of the common children. The idea was to discreetly place the necklace into the pocket of a child and then accuse him of theft. Esmeralda's mother instructed Remira to get as close as possible to the child to execute the plan effectively. Outside, they noticed Anna sitting with Douglas. Given that the lady in charge of the children was known for her protective nature, Remira was advised to do whatever it took to make the plan work. At that moment, Killian, hidden behind a tree, overheard the entire conversation. He was growing increasingly frustrated by the number of troublesome individuals surrounding his sister. Although he felt an urge to confront them immediately, he was apprehensive about the risks, particularly since his mother was also present. Killian knew that if his mother discovered his presence at the party, she would undoubtedly cause a commotion to find him. Given that he had been evading home for several weeks, he feared that this time the consequences would be far more severe than a mere scolding. Returning home was akin to surrendering his current lifestyle, which he greatly enjoyed. He cherished the daily exchanges he had with his sister about her various activities and experiences. Killian resolved to avoid his mother and handle the annoying people himself. He noticed a waiter moving through the crowd and decided to take action. With a quick move, he attacked the waiter from behind, taking over his uniform in the process. Meanwhile, Remira kept a close watch on Anna from a distance, waiting for the perfect moment to slip the necklace into her pocket. She was focused on getting close enough to activate the plan. Remira knew that if she were caught in the act, she would be framed as the thief. Summoning her courage, she began to run towards Anna. As she did, Douglas noticed her and called out, questioning what she was doing. During this chaotic moment, a waiter, who turned out to be Killian in disguise, accidentally got in Remira's path. The collision resulted in spilled wine glasses and a wine stain on Remira's dress. Killian, dressed as a waiter, was navigating the party while contemplating the possibility of kidnapping Remira. However, his plans were interrupted when he saw his mother standing directly in front of him. Acting quickly, Killian managed to hide himself to avoid detection. The Duke then asked the Duchess to accompany him to meet Riene. Killian was relieved that his father had not asked his mother to leave, as this might have led to his discovery. For his plan to succeed, Killian had to act quickly. He grabbed Heath and led him to a secluded corner. Heath was shocked to see Killian and inquired about his presence, noting that Killian had run away due to what he had heard was a rebellious phase. Killian decided to cut the conversation short and requested Heath's assistance. A short while later, Esmeralda approached her mother, who had summoned her. Esmeralda's mother instructed her to go to Anna, as the child was rumored to have a butter knife in her pocket. Esmeralda was perplexed, wondering why Anna would carry such an item. Her mother speculated that Anna might be intending to play with the knife, but emphasized that it was a dangerous object for a child. Since Esmeralda was the teacher, her mother asked her to gently persuade Anna to hand over the knife. Esmeralda agreed and made her way to Anna. Unbeknownst to Esmeralda, her mother's true intention was to frame Anna for stealing the expensive necklace, thereby making Esmeralda appear as the hero who caught the thief. This was all part of Esmeralda's mother's scheme to elevate her daughter's status and make her the central figure in the unfolding drama. When Esmeralda finally reached Anna and checked her pocket, she was astonished to find the very necklace that belonged to the Marchioness. Esmeralda went to Anna and asked her if she had anything dangerous in her pocket. Rihanna was puzzled as to why Esmeralda was asking this and said there was nothing in her pocket. Rihanna then asked Esmeralda why she was asking, but Esmeralda just smiled and thought that they couldn't ignore this because a knife is a very dangerous thing. Rihanna also said that she had been with Anna for a long time, but Esmeralda insisted that she still wanted to check once. Esmeralda's mother approached Lady Anira and asked if this was the necklace she liked so much. As Esmeralda tried to take the knife out of Anna's pocket, she saw Lady Anira's necklace in Anna's pocket instead. Everyone was shocked, including Esmeralda, who was very surprised to see the necklace there. She suddenly thought that her mother had sent her to Anna to do this. Esmeralda's mother began telling everyone to look at what they found in this common girl's pocket, accusing her of stealing a necklace. Everyone in the shop was confused as to what was happening. Esmeralda's mother was very happy because now all the attention was on Anna, and her daughter Esmeralda would be seen as a hero for catching the thief. Esmeralda thought this was very bad because if this continued, Anna would be seen as a thief. Suddenly, Esmeralda stood up and said that Anna hadn't stolen anything. Then, Lady Douglas arrived and said that this whole situation had been staged and that Anna was innocent. She claimed that Lady Ramira had orchestrated everything. Lady Ramira came and asked Douglas why she was framing her in all this, questioning if it was because their relationship hadn't been good lately. She also asked if she had a group that helped orchestrate this. Esmeralda and Rihanna were very angry. Lady Ramira was asking everyone what was happening and why these common children were brought to the party. Rihanna stood to one side, listening and wondering if Ramira was saying all this to embarrass her. Just then, the Duchess stood there thinking about what was happening at her daughter's party. Rihanna said to her mother that it was fine and she would handle everything. The Duke then told his wife that Rihanna could handle it herself. Rihanna was very angry and felt that if her mother got involved, the situation could be resolved quickly. But then everyone would think she wasn't capable of hosting a party or handling things herself. She decided to handle it on her own but thought it would have been better if her mother had handled it. She wondered why all these problems always happened to her when she just wanted to live a simple life. Now she had to handle all this. As Rihanna reached the scene, Ramira started accusing Anna of stealing the necklace. Rihanna asked if there was any proof that Anna had stolen it. Ramira said everyone had seen it fall from Anna's pocket. Anna's mother agreed, saying her daughter had caught the thief. Rihanna was puzzled and began to suspect that Esmeralda's mother was trying to humiliate her. Meanwhile, Esmeralda's mother was praising her daughter for catching the thief. Rihanna shouted that Anna hadn't stolen anything and said she would prove it. Everyone was shocked, wondering where the proof would come from. Rihanna thought that if there was no proof, she would create some because in this world, anything is possible with power. She decided to use her mother's power but was interrupted when Heath grabbed her and said he would show the proof. Rihanna was surprised to see Heath there and Heath asked her if she was going to use the Duchess' power. Rihanna assured him she wouldn't, and Heath whispered in her ear that he would handle it. Heath then went to Lady Anira and asked if she had accidentally spilled wine today. Lady Anira said she hadn't touched any wine today. Heath pointed out that the necklace had wine stains on it. He explained that a child wouldn't drink wine. And holding the necklace, he showed everyone the wine stains. Lady Ramira started spinning stories about children secretly drinking wine. Rihanna stepped forward, stating that the wine was her responsibility and no child had drunk it. Heath then said if the necklace had wine on it, the thief's clothes would also have wine stains, and that person would be the real thief. Everyone's eyes turned to Ramira, and they saw wine stains on her dress. People started whispering, calling it shameful, and Lady Ramira ran away. Rihanna wondered why Amira always caused such trouble. While she was thinking, Anna came to her, apologizing for ruining the party. Rihanna told Anna it wasn't her fault at all and reassured her. Lady Annery also apologized to Anna, saying she was sorry for misunderstanding her and not keeping an eye on her class, leading to this accusation. Rihanna thought it was the first time a noble had spoken so politely to a commoner. Rihanna also apologized to Anna, saying she was sorry these things happened at her party. Annery tried to end the matter politely, saying they should start the children's presentation now. She placed her hand on Anna's cheek and encouraged her to give a good presentation to make everyone forget about the incident. Anna was excited and promised to do her best. Rihanna turned to Heath, thanked him, and complimented his detective skills. Rihanna, with a mix of curiosity and bewilderment, asked Heath how he knew there was a wine stain on the necklace. Heath, momentarily taken aback, wore a look of confusion before he replied that he had happened to see the waiter spill the wine. Rihanna stared at Heath with a puzzled expression, her eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to discern something more. Despite her curiosity, she chose not to investigate further. Instead, she smiled and told Heath that he was just like Sherlock Holmes, praising him for his keen observation and quick thinking. She lauded him as amazing, her admiration evident in her tone. While all this was happening, Killian stood at a distance, his eyes fixed on the interaction between his sister and Heath. He observed every nuance of their conversation, a slight smile playing on his lips, his thoughts a whirlwind of considerations and emotions. Killian stood there, deep in thought, reflecting on the events that had transpired. He considered his actions, thinking that he had only done what was necessary. In his mind, there was no other way. Heath was a person of high status, someone whose words and presence carried significant weight. Killian saw Heath as a formidable figure, someone who could step in when his sister was in trouble. He believed that Heath was the only one who could confidently protect Rihanna in times of need. From a distance, the king of Krija, standing with one of his men, observed the scene. He discussed with his companion the potential of Heath becoming the prince. The king noted that if Heath were to assume this position, there would be no issue with Rihanna becoming the crown princess consort. Rihanna, on the other hand, was reflecting on the day's events. Despite a minor commotion, her first party had concluded successfully. Not only Anna but all the other students had finished their presentations safely. The nobles, including the Marquess of Aegine, had given a round of applause. It seemed that Rihanna had also made a positive impression on the king of Krija. Exhausted from the day's party, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. She ran towards her room, eager to share the day's happenings with Killian. However, upon arriving, she noticed the room was empty. Realizing that Killian must have gone to the palace, she felt a slight twinge of happiness at having the room to herself. She laid down on the bed, her thoughts drifting to how comfortable and great everything seemed at that moment. The silence of the room, a stark contrast to the earlier excitement, felt almost soothing. Meanwhile, back at the Duke's palace, the Duchess stood with a stick in her hand, her expression stern and unforgiving. Killian stood in front of her, his posture rigid and unyielding. The Duchess gave Killian a chance to explain himself, but Killian, seemingly uninterested in offering any explanation, remained silent. The Duchess's anger was palpable. She expressed her disbelief that Killian would miss his only sister's engagement. Hiding Killian with the stick, she watched as he acted as if he was hurt, even though he wasn't. He touched the wrong place, prompting the Duchess to correct him angrily. The Duchess then began to reflect aloud, lamenting that she should have instilled good habits in Killian when he was young and impressionable. She admitted that she had always overlooked Killian's mischievous behavior and his well-being. The Duchess, her voice filled with regret, asked Killian why he had run away from home but stated that she was more interested in why he had returned. After a moment of silence, Killian confessed that he wanted to enroll in the academy. The Duchess was taken aback by his declaration. Killian explained further that he wanted to join the academy to be closer to his sister and assist her more effectively. The Duchess and the other servants exchanged glances, wondering if Killian's intentions were genuine. Killian continued, explaining to the Duchess that at the recent banquet, people had tried to trouble his sister. He informed his mother that Rihanna had stayed silent to avoid worrying her, but he was certain that similar incidents were happening at the academy. The Duchess, her concern growing, asked Killian if Rihanna was truly in trouble and facing difficulties at the academy. The servants, moved by the conversation, started crying, knowing how kind-hearted Rihanna was. They recalled how Rihanna used to worry about the rising prices of houses and the plight of common people. The atmosphere in the room was heavy with emotion, the Duchess's stern expression softening as she listened to her son. Determined, Killian assured his mother that he would go to the academy and ensure that nothing like that happened. With tears in her eyes, the Duchess accepted his request. She told Killian that he had her permission to enroll and praised him for growing up so wonderfully. Killian, feeling a sense of resolve, decided to seek his father's permission as well. He knew his mother would approve without hesitation once he mentioned his sister, but he was slightly apprehensive about his father's reaction. The journey to the Duke's study felt longer than usual, each step filled with the weight of anticipation. Killian stood before the Duke, his heart pounding like a drum. He asked if he could join the academy. The Duke, his expression inscrutable and imposing, asked Killian why he wanted to enroll. Killian replied that he wanted to participate in social events. The Duke, however, pointed out that Killian already attended events without being enrolled in the academy. They discussed the importance of other matters that were more pressing than attending the academy. The Duke suggested that if Killian wanted to broaden his academic knowledge, he could invite scholars to the Duke's estate, which would be more efficient than attending the academy. After a lengthy debate, Killian finally revealed his true concern, his worry about his sister being alone at the academy. The Duke, sensing the sincerity in Killian's voice, looked at him intently. Within moments, the Duke granted his permission, telling Killian he could leave for the academy the next day, or even today if he wished. The Duke instructed Killian to report to him daily about any suspicious individuals around Rihanna. He also asked Killian to keep an eye on the Krija boy to ensure he maintained a proper distance from Rihanna. The Duke granted Killian permission to take any necessary actions at his discretion if he noticed anything unusual. As Killian was about to leave the room, the Duke called him back. In a grave tone, he reminded Killian that the Duke's family could cover up even a murder. He urged Killian not to forget this. Killian, understanding the weight of his father's words, assured him that he understood everything before leaving the room with a determined look on his face. The encounter had solidified Killian's resolve, and as he walked out, he felt a new sense of purpose and responsibility. One bright morning, a new teacher named Ruby entered the grand halls of the prestigious academy. With a composed demeanor, she introduced herself to the students, announcing that she would be their etiquette teacher. Since it was her first day, she decided to start with a simple quiz to understand the students' current knowledge. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. Ruby intended to gauge the level of the students' etiquette skills, but to her surprise, Princess Rihanna scored only 20 points. Concerned by this unexpected result, Ruby decided it was necessary to inform the Duke's household about the matter. This decision, however, turned out to be a significant misstep. Soon after, Ruby received an invitation to the Duke's residence. She was taken aback, as she had not anticipated a personal invitation from the famous Duke and Duchess. She had no idea what their intentions were and felt a mixture of curiosity and anxiety. Upon arriving at the Grand Palace, Ruby was escorted to a lavish sitting room where the Duke and Duchess awaited her. As she seated herself nervously in front of them, the Duchess, with a stern expression, asked Ruby how it was possible that her daughter had scored only 20 points. Ruby explained that the quiz was designed to test the young lady's table manners. The Duchess, maintaining her stern demeanor, asked Ruby if she was implying that their daughter lacked basic table manners. Ruby, now feeling the pressure, hesitated before clarifying that this was not her intention. She explained that Rihanna seemed unsure of the correct use of utensils, which could explain her low score. The Duchess, her expression now shifting to one of anger, pressed Ruby further. She asked if Ruby was suggesting that their daughter could not distinguish between a salad fork and a steak fork. Before Ruby could respond, the Duke intervened. He stated firmly that their daughter had never displayed improper behavior during mealtimes at home. Ruby attempted to bring up the report card, indicating that it showed different results. However, at this point, the Duchess's anger had reached its peak. She began shouting, questioning if the Academy was accusing their daughter of lacking proper etiquette. The Duke, trying to calm his wife, informed Ruby that the Duchess was on the verge of fainting from shock. He urged Ruby to provide a satisfactory explanation. Additionally, Ruby was informed that the Academy's principal had warned her that if this issue was not resolved, a new etiquette teacher would be hired for the next semester. All the teachers at the Academy were struggling with Rihanna's poor performance. The history teacher reported that Rihanna didn't even know the founding year of the empire, and had never seen any of Sisfir's works. Ruby added that Rihanna used a salad fork to cut steak, which was highly unusual. Outside the door, Rihanna overheard the teachers discussing her shortcomings. She felt that all the teachers must be talking about her and noticed that they had started acting strangely around her. They even secretly handed her self-made cheat sheets, trying to help her improve. One day, the math teacher approached Rihanna. Rihanna informed the teacher that despite her lack of knowledge about the founding year of the empire, or the difference between a steak fork and a salad fork, she excelled in math. The teacher confirmed this, explaining that the Academy's math curriculum was equivalent to middle school level in Korea. Given that Rihanna had always excelled in science throughout her education, even reaching graduate school, this was easy for her. The math teacher praised Rihanna, acknowledging her talent and noting that she always answered correctly in class. Rihanna felt a sense of happiness, finally finding a teacher who recognized her abilities and didn't think she was foolish. The teacher had come specifically to ask about the homework Rihanna had submitted. The math teacher asked Rihanna how she had managed to solve a particularly difficult problem, noting that solving one of the top 10 puzzles in the magical book indicated that Rihanna was a genius in math. Rihanna, however, was unaware of the significance of the problem she had solved. The math teacher explained that the problem Rihanna had solved had taken scholars years to interpret. Rihanna looked at her homework and realized that the problem was proving why the square root of 2 is an irrational number. The math teacher told Rihanna that her solution was perfect enough to be published in a journal and asked if she minded submitting it under her name. Rihanna pondered this, realizing that being labeled a genius could interfere with her plans to become a rich and ideal commoner. She told the teacher that she had not come up with the solution herself. It was something someone she knew had solved a long time ago. The person who had solved it lived a reclusive life and had social anxiety, so Rihanna couldn't reveal any more information. After explaining this, Rihanna told the teacher that she needed to go study and hurried away. Finally, the day of the midterm exam arrived. Rihanna was anxious, wondering if she would top the class in history and literature. Everything she had studied seemed to be coming together, making all her efforts worthwhile. However, she soon got stuck on an etiquette question. No matter how hard she tried, she found it difficult to answer the etiquette questions correctly. The teacher in the classroom announced that 20 minutes had passed and that those who had finished could submit their papers and leave. A few students left the room, but Rihanna continued writing. Ruby approached her and asked if she found the paper easy. Rihanna struggled to concentrate as she heard students outside gossiping. Unable to tolerate the distraction, she went outside and shouted that she was still in the middle of the exam. She then noticed that the group of students was staring at Killian. Killian greeted Rihanna warmly and remarked that it had been a very long time since they had last met. As Rihanna stepped out of the classroom, she was immediately struck by the sight of a large group of students gathered in the hallway. The bustling crowd was animated, and at the center of this gathering stood Killian, looking as poised and composed as ever. Her heart skipped a beat in shock, and she quickly made her way over to him, her mind racing with questions and curiosity. Killian's presence at the academy was unexpected, and she couldn't fathom why he was there. She thought to herself, why would Killian be here of all places? Her thoughts were interrupted as she approached him, feeling a mix of confusion and anticipation. Killian turned to her with a calm expression, and in a composed tone, informed her that starting today, he would be studying at the academy. Rihanna's eyes widened even further in surprise and disbelief. She scrutinized him, noting how well he wore the academy uniform with such ease and style, but she quickly pushed that thought aside, reminding herself that there were more pressing issues at hand. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions, one of which was, isn't Killian too young to enroll in the academy? She couldn't help but wonder about the implications of his sudden arrival. Killian, seemingly aware of her inner turmoil, smiled gently and asked about her exam. His question brought her back to the present moment. Rihanna's eyes widened in realization as she remembered the exam she had momentarily forgotten in her surprise. She quickly excused herself and hurried back to the classroom, her heart pounding in her chest. The urgency of the situation made her heart race faster. As she rushed back, Killian called after her, apologizing for interrupting and wasting her time, and wishing her good luck with her exam. After a while, Rihanna found herself standing outside the classroom with Ruby, who was holding her exam results in her hand. The look on Ruby's face spoke volumes, conveying the disappointing truth that there was still no improvement in Rihanna's results. Rihanna sighed deeply, feeling a sense of responsibility and guilt. She assured Ruby that she would contact the Duke and ensure that Ruby wouldn't be dismissed, and apologized for her troublesome parents. Ruby nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude and a hint of relief. Rihanna returned to the hallway where Killian was waiting for her. He inquired about her exam with a concerned look on his face. Rihanna sighed and looked at him accusingly, mentioning the disruption caused by his noisy followers. She raised her voice, explaining that before his arrival, everything had been going smoothly, and she had been just about to write the answer when she got distracted. She paused, her mind flashing to the moment when the Duchess greeted the Empress. Killian, trying to help, suggested that if it were his mother, she would have shaken hands or patted her on the shoulder. Rihanna's eyes widened in realization, understanding that she was likely to fail the etiquette exam now. Killian looked at her warmly and expressed his happiness at seeing her after such a long time. Rihanna turned to him, her expression softening, and reciprocated his sentiment. As it was dinner time, they decided to head to the dining hall together. Killian asked if she used to eat alone before his arrival, and Rihanna shook her head in response. The students in the dining area couldn't help but gossip about Killian, whispering amongst themselves about how they had only seen him once at the National Foundation Festival when he was very young. They recounted tales of his impressive feats, such as being able to catch an orc with his bare hands, and admired his handsome looks. Rihanna, feeling increasingly annoyed by the constant admiration Killian was receiving, grumbled about his infrequent appearances in social circles. She assumed that this was the reason for their curiosity. Killian recalled a memory from their childhood, explaining that he had told his mother he hated the National Foundation Festival and didn't want to attend. He remembered arguing that Rihanna was supposed to make friends, not boyfriends, which had led the Duke to decide that the children had had enough social experience. From that year on, they spent the National Foundation Festival quietly as a family, avoiding the public eye. Since then, they rarely participated in social gatherings, which meant that most lower nobles had probably never seen Killian. Rihanna herself also avoided such gatherings. Killian then asked if people used to gather around her as well, and Rihanna hesitated before replying. In reality, on her first day of school, the other children had judged her for being a commoner. She looked at Killian and asked if he had enrolled in the academy just to tease her. Killian shook his head, explaining that he had a genuine reason for being there. He had been worried that she wouldn't have any friends and came to be her friend. Riene's face turned red with anger, and she stood up abruptly, declaring that she would eat with her friends and starting to walk away. Killian quickly grabbed her arm and gently made her sit back down, earnestly apologizing. After a moment, when her anger had subsided a bit, Riena admitted that she did feel much better now that he was there. She smiled slightly and suggested they finish dinner and head to the dorm together. As they ate, Riena began talking about her friend Esmeralda and mentioned that she had recently become friends with Lady Douglas. She also brought up Heath, causing a noticeable change in Killian's expression. Meanwhile, the principal, who had been informed of Killian's arrival, was in a state of panic. He rushed to Killian, tears in his eyes, and apologized profusely, explaining that they hadn't received any notice of his arrival and couldn't prepare a room for him. Killian looked at him calmly and asked if he could choose his roommate instead. Just then, a person entered the room and greeted Killian warmly. Killian smiled and asked to be called by his name. It was the second prince of Krisia, Gerald Krisia. They both shook hands, and Killian expressed his happiness at seeing him, their reunion filled with warmth and camaraderie. Riena was meticulously cutting a piece of paper, her hands moving with precision until she finally succeeded. It was a letter from the King of Krisia, and as she unfolded it, her eyes scanned the words intently. The letter not only informed her but also mentioned that it had been sent to Heath. It stated that next month, the king intended to give the two princes an opportunity to participate in the state council meeting. The primary objective of this meeting was to devise a solution to the attacks by the Eldings, which had caused significant damage during the rainy season. The King of Krisia believed that Riena, as a princess, would naturally want to assist Heath in this endeavor. He also expressed his anticipation of seeing her perform as admirably as she had at the recent charity party. However, the letter also mentioned Riene's failure in the etiquette exam. Riena thought that she had gained some favor at the charity party, but this piece of news seemed to negate all her efforts. She wondered how the king had come to know about her failure. Despite the setback, Riena understood that participating in the state council meeting was a crucial test for the crown prince position. She also realized this was the perfect opportunity to prove the value of their engagement contract. With determination, Riena set out to find Heath. When Heath saw Riena, he immediately asked why she had come all the way to the upper-class building instead of simply calling him, as he would have gladly come to her. Riena, without a word, took Heath's hand and led him to the library, indicating that she needed to discuss something important. Once they were settled in the quiet of the library, Riena showed Heath the letter she had received from the king. Heath smiled knowingly and said, "So, you finally received the letter." He explained that he hadn't mentioned it earlier because he knew how hard she had worked for the charity party and didn't want to add to her burdens. Riena, however, was resolute. She told Heath that she was determined to see him become the crown prince and that they needed to quickly formulate a strategy. Heath, while appreciative of her enthusiasm, cautioned her not to overexert herself, warning that he wouldn't attend the meeting if she did. After a few moments of silence, they began planning their strategy. The topic of the meeting was to find a solution to the Eldings' attacks, but Riena realized she was unfamiliar with what Eldings were. The puzzled look on Heath's face made it clear that she had made another uninformed comment, showcasing her lack of basic knowledge. Heath sat down with a sigh and explained that Eldings were monsters that appeared riding on lightning. He handed her a book, an encyclopedia of monsters, and Riena recognized it as the book Killian used to read avidly in his childhood. As she opened the first page, she was met with a vivid and unsettling illustration of an Elding. Heath explained that these creatures were roughly the size of humans but were incredibly unpredictable. After lightning strikes, they appeared almost instantly, and if they landed on a building, they would tear off the roof and attack the people inside. The unpredictable nature of their appearances made them difficult to defend against. While nobles were relatively safe within their sturdy castles, the common folk often bore the brunt of these attacks. Curious about how the common people had managed so far, Riena asked Heath. He informed her that villagers typically formed their own militias, or the local lord would send monster hunting squads. It was usually one of these two responses whenever an attack was reported. Heath speculated that the meeting would likely conclude with a decision to expand these support forces. Riena, however, pointed out that this was not a fundamental solution. Heath sighed, agreeing with her assessment but reminding her that this was the reality for a kingdom lacking Astera's protection. Unlike the Empire, he noted that the Empire, where Astera resided, was probably the only place free from monsters. Determined to find a more effective solution, Riena spent many hours poring over books on Eldings. Despite her efforts, the information in all the books seemed redundant. As she read, she was reminded of the time she wrote her thesis, and the challenging yet insightful feedback from her professor. His odd personality aside, his guidance had been invaluable. This memory sparked an idea, and she immediately set out to find Killian. In the garden, Killian was practicing with a sword, his movements precise and fluid. Rihanna approached him and asked if he had ever caught an elding. Killian, without pausing his practice, replied that he had indeed caught one. Rihanna realized she should have asked him from the start and eagerly inquired about how he had managed it. Killian, with a sly smile, asked if she wanted to know the method for free. Killian asked Rihanna if she wanted to know how to hunt an elding, and when Rihanna eagerly said yes, he mischievously asked her if she was hoping to learn it for free. Rihanna, not missing a beat, promised Killian she would buy him his favorite macaron. Killian couldn't help but smile at her response and reassured her that he was just kidding. However, seeing her genuine interest, he decided to tell her how to hunt an elding. Killian explained that when lightning strikes, one just needs to be there, waiting beforehand. Rihanna, ever diligent, had a notebook and a pen in her hand and was writing everything down meticulously. Rihanna's confusion grew as she tried to comprehend how one could predict where lightning would strike. She asked Killian how one would know where and when the lightning would strike. Killian, with a confident tone, told her that one can see the lightning when it flashes, and the trick is to watch the first flash, and then run to that spot before it strikes again. Rihanna found herself wondering how anyone could possibly travel faster than lightning. The more she thought about it, the more disappointed she felt. She realized she had been foolish to expect common sense from Killian. Killian, noticing her disappointment, asked if he hadn't been helpful. He informed her that it was his own specialty, and that their father also catches them after the lightning because he says it's too dazzling to see clearly. Rihanna found it hard to believe him, not even for a moment, but she thanked him nonetheless. She told him that even if his advice was not very helpful, just having him around made her feel reassured. She also mentioned that she would ask him more questions if she needed further assistance. As Rihanna left, Killian pondered over the fact that Rihanna was clearly clueless about eldings. This was understandable, given that his father and he always burned all the monster corpses to ensure Rihanna wouldn't see them. Now, seeing Heath ask Rihanna to solve the monster problem made Killian feel a pang of sadness. He thought to himself that this princess could not be trusted. Despite his doubts, Killian was determined to protect his sister at all costs. When he saw Heath standing with Rihanna, he felt a surge of anger and wanted him to stay away from her. However, his thoughts were interrupted by a memory of the king saying that if Heath became the crown prince, Rihanna would be a perfect match to become the crown princess without any issues. Killian was far from pleased with this notion. After some time, Heath approached Rihanna and offered her a drink, suggesting she take a break from her preparations. Heath inquired if Rihanna had any plans for the next day. Rihanna, deeply engrossed in her preparation for the upcoming meeting, informed him that she would probably continue her research on eldings. Heath, sensing an opportunity, suggested they go on a field trip instead. He pointed out that there seemed to be no more information in the library, and it would be beneficial to visit the areas where eldings had been sighted. As he proposed this, a blush crept onto his face, but Rihanna was quick to agree as she had completed her preparations. Rihanna told Heath that she would start preparing for the field trip, but Heath surprised her by saying that he had already taken care of everything, and she just needed to accompany him. Curious, Rihanna asked Heath about what he had said earlier, feeling as though he had been hinting at a date. Heath's face turned bright red with shyness, and he started coughing nervously. He then asked Rihanna if it had been that obvious that he was asking for a date. Rihanna was taken aback and asked, "What?" Later that night, Gerald was in his room when he noticed Killian approaching. Killian saw that Gerald was reading the Monster Encyclopedia, and commented that he used to read it when he was younger. Gerald mentioned that he had been reading a lot lately but was not making any progress with his research on eldings. He then asked Killian if he knew a lot about eldings. Killian, with a hint of pride, responded that he knew them very well. Gerald laughed at his own question, realizing that it was obvious Killian would know about eldings. Killian told Gerald that he knew far more about eldings than what was written in the encyclopedia, and asked if he wanted to know more. Gerald, intrigued, said that it would be great if Killian shared his knowledge. Killian then turned around and suggested that they sleep for now, as they had to get up early the next day. Gerald thought to himself that Killian was just as the rumors described, someone who did whatever he wanted. Killian mentioned that the next day they would go to the Danube Mountains together to hunt eldings. He also informed Gerald that there would be a storm tomorrow. The next day, on a sunny morning, Heather and Rihanna were eagerly preparing for their field trip. Rihanna, bursting with excitement, suggested to Heath that they should start by interviewing the villagers about their direct experiences with the damage. Heath, trying to manage her enthusiasm, gently told her that she was being a bit too eager. Nevertheless, Rihanna insisted that they needed to gather as much information as possible before sunset. Heath, ever patient, assured her that they had plenty of time and suggested they eat something first to fuel up for the day ahead. Rihanna agreed, asking Heath if they should start looking for a restaurant. However, it turned out Heath had already arranged everything, and a delightful spread of food was set out before them. Rihanna's mouth watered at the sight, and she could hardly believe her eyes. Heath explained to Rihanna that they needed to eat well in order to work hard. They both started eating, and Rihanna noticed that there wasn't another person in the restaurant. She guessed they were fortunate enough to have the entire place to themselves, almost as if they had reserved it. Heath watched her reaction with a smile, clearly pleased by her enjoyment. After they finished eating, Rihanna was reinvigorated and ready to dive into finding out details about the Eldings. However, Heath had different plans in mind. He suggested they visit a famous cake shop nearby, and despite her focus on the survey, Rihanna couldn't resist the idea of dessert. As they made their way to the cake shop, Rihanna couldn't help but think that Heath was allowing himself to be distracted. She asked him if they could start the survey after enjoying their treat. Heath, ever the gentleman, held her hand and led her to a nearby area where Eldings had been reported. They arrived at a picturesque lake, surrounded by a dense forest and glistening in the sunlight. Heath, still holding Rihanna's hand, observed the serene beauty of the place. Rihanna questioned whether this was really the area where Eldings had appeared. Heath explained that while the weather was splendid today, during the rainy season, thunderstorms brought lightning, and many Eldings appeared around the lake. Rihanna was taken aback, having expected something more ominous like haunted ruins or ancient sites. After taking in the stunning view for a while, Heath suggested they take a boat tour of the lake. Rihanna found the idea appealing and agreed. They both boarded a boat, and as they glided across the water, Rihanna looked down into the crystal-clear lake, seeing her own reflection. Despite the tranquility, Rihanna's mind was still on their mission. She wanted to gather useful information and prove herself as not being a burden to Heath. She started discussing the Eldings once more. Heath remarked that she was always thinking about work, to which Rihanna replied that she was the epitome of dedication. She insisted that if she didn't work hard, she might as well be a corpse. Rihanna was determined to work several times over the amount she was paid and mentioned that just as the crown prince's seat was Heath's, she was prepared to dedicate her life to their cause. Heath interrupted her, stating that he understood she only saw him as a good partner, but he wanted her to know she meant much more to him. Holding her hand, Heath revealed his feelings, which reminded Rihanna of when he hinted at asking her for a date but then changed the subject. Rihanna considered Heath a kind and good person but had never thought of him as more than a friend. Sensing her discomfort, Heath changed the topic once again, telling her that she was already doing more than enough without overworking herself. He revealed that today was meant for relaxation, not a survey. Rihanna asked if the plan had really never been about the survey, and Heath confirmed it, admitting he brought her there just to unwind. Heath confessed that if he had told her in advance, she would never have agreed to come. He encouraged Rihanna not to feel sad and to enjoy the day. Rihanna decided to make the most of the situation and thanked him. She reflected on how fortunate she was to have someone like Heath, who cared for her deeply. She resolved to bury her feelings beneath the surface once again, focusing on the moment. Meanwhile, in a different part of the forest, the weather was tumultuous with lightning striking, and the wind howling fiercely. Gerald stood amidst the chaos, calling out desperately for Killian. His face was a mask of fear, and his voice trembled as he insisted that they should return. However, Killian was nowhere to be found. As Gerald turned around, he was confronted by the sight of Eldings standing behind him. The terror was overwhelming, and Gerald completely lost his composure, succumbing to the horror of the situation. As the tranquil lake tour takes an unexpected turn, what secrets will Heath and Rihanna uncover next? Will the peaceful setting deceive them? Or is there a hidden danger lurking beneath the serene surface? And amidst the storm, what fate awaits Gerald and Killian as they face the terrifying Eldings? Don't miss the next thrilling chapter. Let's see that in the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.